CEO pulls over in the middle of a raging storm to help a pregnant stranger, only to realize fate has just introduced him to an unexpected love. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Night had fallen over the city like a dark velvet curtain, bringing with it a sudden storm that pounded the streets with relentless force. Headlights cut through the sheets of rain, illuminating a path that felt oddly isolated despite the bustling metropolis beyond. Inside his sleek black SUV, Mason Reed, a 28-year-old tech CEO whose every waking hour was dedicated to the digital empire he'd built, tapped the steering wheel in agitation. "What a night," he muttered under his breath, glancing warily at the wipers battling the downpour. On a typical evening, Mason would still be at his office perched high in the Reed Innovation skyscraper, refining pitches and closing deals. But tonight, the power grid in his building had flickered, the storm too ferocious even for the city's robust infrastructure. With meetings cancelled, he had grudgingly surrendered to a rare early departure. Lightning tore across the sky, revealing for an instant the outlines of silent trees at the edge of the road. Thunder rolled in a fierce echo. Mason's phone pinged with a weather alert. Flash floods possible in low-lying areas. He inhaled deeply, determined to keep going. His plush leather seat enveloped him, a small comfort against nature's fury. As he pressed onward, his high beams caught a shape up ahead, something on the shoulder of the road. His heart quickened. A lone figure stood in the rain, drenched from head to toe, frantically waving one arm while the other rested on what appeared to be the hood of a broken-down car. Most drivers might have ignored it in this weather, but something about the silhouette looked alarmingly vulnerable. Mason slowed, pulling onto the drenched gravel behind the stranded vehicle. He lowered his window just a crack, enough to speak without letting the storm inside. "Are you okay?" he called out. Through the rain, he glimpsed a young woman's face, pale and soaked. She blinked against the water streaming from her hair. "Please," she said, voice quivering, "my car died and my phone's dead. I don't know what to do." Mason observed how her free hand rested protectively over her abdomen. She was pregnant. Concern twisted in his chest. "Get in," he offered without hesitation. The last thing this woman needed was to stand alone in a storm like this, especially in her condition. She stepped toward the SUV, every inch of her drenched clothing clinging to her small frame. Mason hurried out into the downpour, holding an umbrella he'd swiftly grabbed from the passenger seat. He opened the back door for her, the wind threatening to tear the umbrella from his grasp. "Thank you," she whispered, sliding into the seat. Once she was safely inside, Mason got back behind the wheel, the storm's roar muffled again by closed doors. He took a moment to turn on the heat and direct the vents her way, noticing how her hands trembled, either from the cold or from pure anxiety. She was young, maybe mid-20s if that, and looked exhausted, as though she'd been on her feet for hours. Her long hair plastered to her cheeks. She pushed it aside and tried to compose herself. That was when Mason really saw her face. Despite the worry etched into every line, there was a kind of gentle determination in her eyes. "My name is Mason," he said, keeping his voice calm. "I can call roadside assistance for you, or if you need a ride somewhere, I can do that too. Are you hurt?" She shook her head, a droplet sliding down her temple. "I'm Lily Dawson. I'm not hurt, just cold and stranded." Her words came out in a rush, like she was trying not to cry in front of a stranger. At that moment, lightning illuminated the interior of the SUV, casting sharp shadows across the leather seats. Mason spotted the swell of her belly, confirming his suspicion. She was pregnant and, by the looks of it, fairly far along. "How far are you?" he asked gently, motioning toward her baby bump. The question hung in the air, bridging them with unexpected intimacy. She swallowed, hugging herself for warmth. 7 months, or almost, she replied. I was driving home from a parent-teacher conference. I'm a school teacher, Lily added quickly, like she needed to justify her late drive. Then the storm hit, my car sputtered, and I guess luck wasn't on my side tonight. Mason nodded, turning the SUV's heater higher. The windows began to fog with a comforting warmth that contrasted the violent storm outside. He glanced at Lily's shivering form, concerned. "We need to get you somewhere safe," he said, "at least until the storm calms down." Her eyes widened, a subtle tremor in her voice. "I can't impose. I just need maybe a phone call and I'll be out of your hair." But Mason recognized that determined type of humility. He'd seen it in his early days of building Reed Innovations when refusing help felt like a point of pride. "It's not an imposition," he insisted gently. "Do you have anyone you can call?" The question made Lily pause. She looked away, tears pricking at her eyes, but she fought them back. "No one close by," she finally admitted. "I moved here for a teaching position a few months ago, and my ex isn't exactly in the picture." She tried to mask the hurt in her voice with a small, wobbly smile. "He left when things got complicated." The tension in Mason's chest deepened. Abandoned at 7 months pregnant? The idea made him bristle. He thought about the unborn child whose mother had nowhere to turn on a storm-swept night. "All right," he said softly, trying not to let anger seep into his tone. "Let's get you warm and check with a mechanic tomorrow morning. I'm sure the roads will be better by then." A crack of thunder overhead punctuated the vow. Lily nodded, reluctant relief etched into her features. Her breath visibly shook. "Thank you. I'm not sure how to repay you for this." "No repayment needed," Mason replied. "I'll drive you to my place. There's plenty of room, and once the storm eases, we can figure out what to do about your car." Silence settled between them, broken only by the rhythmic drumming of rain on the windshield. Outside, the storm raged, a tempest swirling in black clouds, but inside the SUV was a soft, shared hush. Mason signaled, pulled onto the main road, and started toward his high-rise apartment. In the rearview mirror, Lily was quietly leaning her head back against the seat, perhaps trying to calm her nerves. He caught sight of her reflection. The wave of an old memory washed over him. Once, years ago, his own mother had been left in a similarly desperate situation, though in a different context. The pang of empathy made him drive more carefully, scanning every slick turn. He couldn't shake the feeling that fate had steered him to this moment, to help someone who, by all accounts, had no one else. They reached the private parking deck beneath Mason's apartment building, the high concrete ceiling echoing the hiss of tires rolling over wet pavement. He led Lily through a side entrance, grateful for the dryness of the underground hallway. Lights flickered overhead, a sign that even this modern structure wasn't immune to the ferocity of the storm. Inside the elevator, Lily braced herself against a wall, closing her eyes just briefly. Mason pressed the button for the penthouse suite, ignoring the usual swirl of pride he might feel. Now, it was just a sanctuary from the howling winds outside. As they ascended, her breathing eased, the warmth of the elevator comforting them both. When the doors slid open, Lily's eyes widened at the space, a sleek, minimalist interior with floor-to-ceiling windows that revealed the city, now dark and beaten by the relentless rain. Modern furniture in cool grays and blacks hinted at Mason's taste for cutting-edge design. No surprise for a successful tech entrepreneur. Yet he felt a slight embarrassment. Would she think him unapproachable in these surroundings? "Wow," she said quietly, stepping out of the elevator. Thunder flickered in the distance, lighting up the entire living room for a moment. The view felt like an ocean of black glass, shimmering with the storm. "It's not always this gloomy," Mason offered gently, switching on a few subtle lamps. "Can I get you some towels? Something warm to drink?" She nodded. "Yes, please, that would be nice." Her shoulders sagged in exhaustion, and for a second she touched her belly as though reassuring the little one inside that things were safe now. Mason guided her to the sofa, which was anchored near a low coffee table stacked with design magazines and the remnants of projects he'd brought home to review. "Make yourself comfortable," he told her. "I'll grab some towels." He hurried to the linen closet, rummaging for the softest set of towels he had. Something about the weight of her situation tugged at him. Pregnant, alone, in a city she barely knew, with no one to call for help. He'd never considered himself a caretaker type. He was always consumed by expansion plans, hiring decisions, product launches. But in Lily's presence, a protective instinct flared. Returning, he found her gazing out at the storm-lashed skyline, one hand braced on the couch for support. The city lights twinkled below, haloed by swirling clouds. "Here," Mason said, offering the towels. "You can use the guest bathroom if you'd like to dry off. Let me know if you need any clothes, something comfortable. My sister sometimes leaves extra sweatshirts when she visits." Lily glanced at him, emotion flickering in her eyes as she accepted the towels. "Thank you. I can't express how grateful I am. You barely know me." Mason gave a half smile. "Everyone needs a hand sometimes." She disappeared down the hallway, leaving him alone with the hush of the storm outside. Mason took a seat on the sofa, running a hand through his damp hair. A small laugh escaped him. He'd never envisioned welcoming a pregnant stranger into his penthouse during a vicious storm. Yet here he was. For once, business matters. Endless spreadsheets and investor calls seemed distant. Something more human, more urgent, had taken priority. He gazed at the city lights, mulling over Lily's predicament. Yes, she was a stranger, but in that moment, he felt compelled to protect her at all costs. A wave of lightning illuminated the windows, revealing the rain-streaked glass. For an instant, he saw his own reflection, solemn eyes, tense jaw, and behind him the empty, immaculate spaces of an apartment that never really felt like home. He exhaled slowly. Even from behind the bathroom door, he could hear Lily's soft movements, water dripping as she toweled off. This wasn't just an act of kindness, he realized. Something deeper was stirring, a shift in priorities he hadn't seen coming. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, but as the next flash of lightning lit up the sky, Mason wondered if the real storm was inside him, the sudden surge of empathy and the unspoken sense that this moment, this night, could change everything in his carefully ordered life. The storm's wrath continued to batter the cityscape, lightning flickering over the towering penthouse windows and momentarily brightening the sleek living room with electric white. Mason stood by the glass looking out at the relentless downpour. Beyond the beads of rain racing down the windows, skyscrapers disappeared into the swirling night clouds. He'd lived in this penthouse for 3 years, but it had never felt quite like a home, more like a resting place between frantic work hours and business flights. Yet tonight, there was an unspoken warmth, a stirring sense of significance, sparked by the quiet presence of the stranger who had arrived at his doorstep. He could hear Lily in the guest bathroom, the soft shuffle of her steps and the low rumble of running water as she dried her hair. As he waited, Mason realized he was half holding his breath, anticipation tugging at his thoughts. Why did this feel so strangely important? He reminded himself that it was simply basic human decency. A pregnant woman needed shelter, and he had the means to provide it. But as thunder rumbled overhead, he couldn't deny a deeper current, an unexplainable pull, nudging him to make sure she was truly all right. The bathroom door eased open, and Lily emerged wearing one of his sister's oversized sweatshirts, her damp hair loosely braided over one shoulder. She seemed more relaxed, though her eyes still held a trace of apprehension. Mason offered a small smile, gesturing to the plush sofa. "Feel better?" Lily nodded, hugging the sweatshirt sleeves over her hands. "Much better. This is very kind of you." She scanned the penthouse again, taking in the high ceilings and tasteful furniture. "I promise I won't stay too long. Once the roads are clear, I'll—" "Hey!" he interrupted, shaking his head. We'll figure out tomorrow when it comes. For tonight, you're safe here. That's what matters." She glanced down at her belly, placing a palm on it as if silently soothing the child. Mason's gaze followed the movement. He felt a pang of concern he couldn't quite place. Was she comfortable enough? Should he call a doctor just to be sure she was okay? Or would that overstep the bounds of politeness? 1,000 questions raced through his mind, all of them unfamiliar and oddly urgent. Lily cleared her throat, drawing his attention back. I'm sorry if I'm distracting you from anything important. You're obviously someone who works a lot. I can tell from the half-finished proposals on your coffee table." Mason let out a gentle laugh, glancing at the scattered paperwork. "Guilty," he said. "The truth is, I was on my way home early for once. My building lost power, so I couldn't keep working. In a strange way, the storm forced me to slow down." She offered a small, empathetic smile. "Sometimes life has a way of telling us to take a break." A fleeting sadness crossed her face before she continued. "When I was still with my ex, I'd work late at school too, but for different reasons. I was saving money on the side, trying not to let him know how prepared I was, just in case." Mason tilted his head. "Just in case what?" She hesitated, swallowing hard. In case the day came when he decided a family wasn't for him, and he did decide that, or so it seemed, she added, voice tight. "He walked out the moment my pregnancy became real, said it was too much." Those last words hung in the air, illuminated by another flicker of lightning. The storm seemed to share Lily's tension, crackling with raw energy. Mason saw the pain in her eyes, the deep betrayal that had shaped her into someone who expected disappointment. He exhaled, sympathy warring with anger for this man he'd never met. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "No one deserves that." She nodded, biting her lip as if to keep her composure. In the silence that followed, the wind howled outside, and the penthouse lights flickered, threatening to join the darkness that had claimed much of the city. Mason coughed gently into his fist, guiding the conversation to safer territory. "Are you hungry? I realize it's late, but I can fix something if you'd like." A faint laugh escaped her. "Depends. Are we talking about actual cooking or takeout menus?" He gave a sheepish grin. "Takeout was my go-to strategy, but I've picked up some cooking basics over the last year. My sister insisted I learn so I wouldn't live off instant noodles." "Well, color me impressed," Lily teased softly. "Sure, if it's not too much trouble. Maybe something warm?" Mason headed to the open-concept kitchen, beckoning her to follow. The overhead lighting cast a cozy glow on the marble countertops and stainless steel appliances. Rummaging through the fridge, he pulled out fresh vegetables, eggs, and some leftover grilled chicken. "How about an omelet and a side salad?" he offered. "It's quick, but at least it's homemade." Lily slid onto one of the bar stools, resting her elbows carefully on the counter. "That sounds perfect." He set to work, chopping tomatoes and peppers in a rapid, methodical manner. The hiss of the pan and the gentle aroma of butter filled the air. Lily watched him with quiet curiosity, occasionally glancing at his confident hands. In any other setting, they might have been holding a tablet, demonstrating a new app prototype or flipping through company reports. Right now, those same hands whisked eggs, weaving a moment of normalcy in the midst of a storm-stricken night. As the food sizzled, Lily's gaze wandered. She noticed framed family photos on a nearby shelf, rare glimpses of Mason's personal life. There was a picture of him with an older woman, presumably his mother, both smiling under a bright sun at some beach. Another showed him in front of a newly unveiled building with the Reed Innovations logo, surrounded by employees. A question formed on her lips, but she hesitated, not wanting to pry. Mason, sensing her curiosity, spoke without turning around. "My mom. She's in most of those pictures. She's retired now, moved away to a quieter town. We talk often, though." "She must be proud of you," Lily said softly. He shrugged, carefully folding the omelet. She's proud that I chase my dreams, but I think she'd be prouder if I spent a bit more time living, not just working." A short silence passed, and then he added in a half-joking tone, "All those nights writing code in my bedroom when I was a teenager must have worried her." Lily cracked a genuine smile. "My mom used to say the same thing about me, in her own way. I grew up loving books, devouring every novel I could find. She'd urge me to go out, make friends, enjoy the world. But I was happy in my own little universe." Mason placed 2 plates on the counter, each with a fluffy omelet and a small side salad. He handed her a fork. "Reading teachers make the best teachers, I bet." She laughed lightly, and that warmth was contagious. The tension of the night eased as they shared the meal. Steam rose from the plates, the room's hush broken only by the sound of rain continuing its relentless dance against the windows. Between bites, Lily occasionally slowed, pressing a hand to her side. Mason noticed. "Everything okay?" She pursed her lips, nodding carefully. "Probably just a little cramp. Happens sometimes, but I'm all right." He made a mental note to keep an eye on her, though he resisted an urge to call a hospital right that moment. They finished their food in companionable silence. When Lily placed her fork down, exhaustion weighed on her, the day's stress in every tired muscle. Mason stood, taking her plate. "I'll handle the cleanup. You need rest." A sudden wave of protectiveness cut through his usual calm. "I have a spare bedroom, really comfortable bed. Let me show you." She hesitated, always on the verge of gratitude, yet also guilt. Mason, I don't want to disrupt your life. It's late, but if you have a couch, that's enough." "Don't be silly," he insisted. "It's no disruption. I'd never forgive myself if you slept on a couch with your baby due in 2 months. Slowly, Lily nodded, surrendering. "Then thank you. Really." He guided her down a short hallway, past doors that led to rarely used guest bathrooms and a study filled with prototypes of software designs. Finally, they reached a serene bedroom with soft gray walls and a neatly made queen-sized bed. One of the windows revealed a corner of the storm-ridden city, but the shutters could be drawn to seal out the dark night. Lily stepped inside. A subtle sense of comfort radiated from the space, accentuated by the hush of high-quality carpeting underfoot. She touched the edge of the bed. "It's so nice," she murmured, as if her last residence had been anything but. Mason cleared his throat. "There's extra bedding in the closet, though I think you'll be plenty warm. The bathroom is right across the hall if you need it. And, He paused, wondering if it was too forward to add, "If you feel anything weird, any pain or anything, I'm just in the next room. Don't hesitate, okay?" "Okay," Lily said softly. Her eyes shone with unspoken appreciation. He gave a small nod and backed toward the door, flicking off the overhead light so only the city's glow remained. "Sleep well," he whispered, stepping out and gently closing the door behind him. In the hallway, the storm's moan was muffled behind thick glass and walls. Mason felt his shoulders tense, a swirl of conflicting emotions in his chest, relief that she was safe, worry about her state of mind, and a strange gratitude for this unexpected connection. That last thought unsettled him. He'd never meant to form any bond with a stranger, let alone a woman thrust into his life by a broken car in a ferocious storm. Yet something about her vulnerability, her quiet resolve to handle everything alone, moved him. Could it be that in providing her shelter, he was also opening a door to a deeper kind of humanity he'd unknowingly walled off? Thunder groaned once more, as if echoing the question. Mason returned to the living room, flicking off the lamps one by one. In the darkness, the city's neon heart pulsed beyond the windows, a single golden glow in an ocean of black. He stared at it for a lingering moment, exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Whatever tomorrow brought, he was certain this night would mark the start of something he never could have predicted. Morning arrived softly. the storm's fierce tempo finally slowing to a muffled drizzle against the windows. Pale sunlight filtered through the penthouse's wide glass panes, revealing streaks where rainwater had dried overnight. The city below was waking from its watery chaos, traffic slowly picking up as people resumed their routines. Inside the guest bedroom, Lily stirred under the gentle hush of the early hour. She opened her eyes to the unfamiliar space, a modern room in soothing grays and whites. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then, the events of last night returned. The abandoned roadside, the battering storm, and Mason Reed's kind offer of shelter. A swirl of gratitude and lingering embarrassment filled her, and she exhaled, pressing a hand to the gentle rise of her belly. The baby responded with a light flutter, as if reminding Lily that neither of them were alone now. Her thoughts turned to what the day might bring. She needed to find a mechanic for her car, figure out how to pay for the repairs she could barely afford, and, most of all, confirm that she hadn't imposed too much on Mason, who'd already gone out of his way. Carefully, she swung her legs over the edge of the bed and stood. The penthouse was quiet, except for a faint hum that might have been a heating vent. She caught a glimpse of herself in a large wall mirror, her hair still slightly rumpled, face showing signs of fatigue. Though she felt an instinctive flush of self-consciousness, she consoled herself that Mason surely expected her to be a bit disheveled after the previous night's ordeal. When she opened the door, the scent of freshly brewed coffee drifted down the hall, mingling with a more subtle aroma of breakfast. Toast, perhaps, or eggs. Following that comforting warmth, she ventured into the main living area. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a living room that seemed almost surreal in its stylishness. Glass and steel blended seamlessly with plush seating, and Lily couldn't help but feel a pang of awe, wondering what it would be like to inhabit such a world on a daily basis. She found Mason in the kitchen, his hair still damp from a shower, wearing jeans and a crisp, dark polo. He moved with fluid efficiency, placing slices of whole-grain bread in a toaster, stirring something in a saucepan. He glanced up, hearing her footsteps. "Good morning," he greeted, voice low and warm. "You're up early? Did you sleep okay?" She managed a smile. "I did, thank you. The bed was really comfortable, and the storm calmed down eventually." "That's good." He fiddled with the stove knob, lowering the flame under the saucepan. "I was just making coffee, decaf if you prefer. I wasn't sure." Lily settled into a stool at the kitchen island, grateful for the courtesy. "Decaf is probably best, yeah. That's thoughtful of you." He poured steaming liquid into 2 mugs, pushing one toward her. "I learned that lesson when my sister was pregnant," he said, a fleeting grin crossing his face. "She lectured me once about caffeine and its evils." Lily's eyebrows rose. "You have a niece or nephew?" "A niece," he said, leaning against the countertop. "She's almost 2 now, lives halfway across the country, so I don't get to see her as often as I'd like. But I've picked up a few tips about pregnancy from my sister's constant calls and occasional rants." Lily sipped the decaf, the warmth soothing her throat. "I appreciate you being so aware. Not everyone is." She cradled the mug, scanning the penthouse's open layout. Daylight revealed an array of carefully chosen decor. Abstract art pieces, a glass shelf lined with either rare collectibles or tech prototypes. She couldn't tell which. "I'm still in awe that you were willing to take me in, just like that." Mason shrugged lightly, though his expression showed genuine sincerity. "It was the right thing to do, and I had plenty of space." She studied him, realizing that behind his calm demeanor there was a keen alertness in his eyes, like a man used to quick thinking and constant decision-making. Perhaps that was the hallmark of a successful CEO. "Well, I'm thankful," she said. "It might have been a scary night if you hadn't stopped." He cleared his throat and turned off the stove, grabbing a spoon to ladle scrambled eggs onto a plate. "Speaking of that, I called a mechanic I trust a few minutes ago," he mentioned. "He can tow your car from the roadside and check it out. Hopefully it's just the battery or something simple. A wave of relief washed over Lily. Wow, thanks. I was dreading that phone call. She glanced at her mug. I hate asking for help, especially for something like this, but I guess I don't really have a choice right now. You do have a choice, Mason said firmly. You can handle everything alone if you want, but that doesn't mean you have to. The statement hung in the air, gentle yet earnest. Lily found herself swallowing hard, unsure how to respond. Instead, she gestured to the eggs. Is that for me too, or am I overstepping? He smirked. It's all yours. I already ate. Couldn't sleep much, so I've been up a while. He handed her the plate and a fork. Eat, then we'll figure out your car situation together. She murmured a thank you and took a tentative bite. The eggs were fluffy, lightly seasoned, reminding her oddly of simpler times when she would wake up to her mother's cooking before rushing off to school. Yet the penthouse environment was so far removed from her childhood home. The contrast made her heart ache for a second, a reminder of how different her life had become. They lapsed into a comfortable silence punctuated by the soft hum of the city outside. Mason grabbed his phone and stepped aside, murmuring instructions to the mechanic. Lily observed him, noticing how measured and polite he was on the call, yet how firmly he got results. She figured that was how he ran his company, poised, confident, and unwavering. When he ended the call, she felt a flicker of concern. Do you need to be at your office? She asked. I know your time is probably precious. I can meet the mechanic myself, handle the car. Mason shook his head. I called my assistant, cleared my morning. Everything's handled for now. With an ironic smile, he added, one perk of being the boss is that you can skip a meeting if you have to. She smiled back, finishing the last of her eggs. It must be nice. It is, he admitted, though skipping too many can cost you. But today felt important. For reasons Lily couldn't articulate, her chest felt tight with gratitude. She mumbled a quiet thank you again, aware that words hardly conveyed her full depth of relief. True to his word, Mason guided her through the morning steps. Together, they found her insurance information online. Her phone had enough battery left to access her email. They called the towing company. Within an hour, a bearded mechanic named Carl arrived at the penthouse's underground parking deck, greeting them politely before driving off to retrieve Lily's car from the roadside. While they waited, Mason invited her to sit in his home office, a minimalistic room with large windows that overlooked the awakening city. A sleek workstation stood at the center, multiple monitors and a desk scattered with design sketches. Lily peered at a digital blueprint on one of the screens. It looked like an interface for an app. Color-coded diagrams and lines of code she didn't understand. This is where you work? She asked, trying not to stare too obviously at the high-tech environment. Usually. Sometimes I prefer the actual office building. Depends on my mood, he said, powering off the monitors. I was finishing a prototype for a new VR application. We're expanding beyond the usual software solutions Reed Innovations is known for. Her eyebrows rose, genuinely impressed. Virtual reality? That's incredible. I have a friend who tried VR for teaching science classes. It captured the kids' attention more than the standard textbooks. That's the goal, he said. Finding new ways to engage people, whether in education or entertainment. It's a frontier that's exciting to me. She gazed at the monitors for a moment, imagining an entire company built from the ground up, guided by Mason's ambition. You're really impressive, she said quietly. Young, successful, and yet you didn't hesitate to help a stranger. He shifted slightly as though uncertain how to receive the compliment. I just follow what feels right, he offered, voice subdued. Then, with a self-deprecating chuckle, he added, I'm not always this selfless, believe me. Most days I'm so buried in code and investor calls that I forget there's a world outside. Lily regarded him, thinking how quick he was to deflect praise. Well, I'm still grateful, she said, A ping from Mason's phone interrupted them. He glanced at the screen. "Carl just got your car. He's towing it back to his shop. We can head there in a bit, see what the damage is." Nerves twisted in Lily's stomach, but she nodded. Repair costs loomed like a threat. With her modest teacher's salary and the baby on the way, she was already stretched thin. Still, she mustered a brave front. "Lead the way," she said, standing up. They took the elevator down to Mason's SUV. The air outside was crisp and damp from the night storm, puddles reflecting the subdued sky overhead. Lily settled into the passenger seat this time, mindful not to drip water everywhere like she had last night. As Mason navigated the city streets, Lily caught glimpses of her own reflection in the window. Tired eyes, anxious lines on her forehead. She recalled how, just a few hours ago, she'd been trembling in this same vehicle, drenched and desperate. Now, thanks to him, she felt grounded, if still unsettled by her uncertain future. When they reached the mechanic's shop, a clang of tools and the faint smell of motor oil greeted them. Carl waved from under the hood of Lily's battered car, which looked even sorrier under fluorescent lights. Lily braced herself, stepping closer. Carl glanced up, wiping grease-stained fingers on a rag. "It's not as bad as it could be," he said. "Battery's completely shot, though, and I'm seeing a lot of corrosion on these terminals. Alternator might be okay, but I'll check more thoroughly. If it's just the battery, we can swap it, fix the wiring, and you'll be good as new." Relief spread through Lily. "That sounds manageable. Do whatever you need," she said, though her pulse quickened at the idea of cost. She forced herself to add, "How much do you estimate?" He scratched his chin. "A decent replacement battery plus labor. Maybe a couple hundred total if the alternator's fine. It's an older model, but nothing too rare. Shouldn't be more than that." Lily swallowed. A few $100s. That was still a steep price right now, but not ruinous. "Okay," she managed, trying to hide any wobble in her voice. I can pay that." Mason lingered at her side, hands in his pockets, quietly evaluating the situation. "I'm sure Carl can give you a discount," he joked lightly to the mechanic. "After all, you're working under special circumstances, right?" Carl chuckled. "For you, Mr. Reed, anything." Then he shot Lily a warm smile, his tone turning polite. "Don't worry, ma'am. We'll get you set up in no time." They stepped away, letting Carl continue his work. Lily could sense Mason's concern beside her. She appreciated his support, but felt an instinctive need to stand on her own. "I'll handle the cost," she assured him. "I'm sure you'd offer to help, but I have at least enough saved for this." He glanced at her thoughtfully. "I understand," he said, not pressing further. The last thing he wanted was to undermine her pride or independence. A short lull followed, filled by the distant hum of traffic and occasional clang of the mechanic's tools. Lily tried to calm the flutter in her chest. "When it's fixed, I'll get out of your hair," she said gently, turning to Mason. "I know you have your life to get back to. I can't thank you enough for everything." His gaze met hers, eyes flickering with something unreadable. "I'm not in any rush," he admitted softly. "But I get it. This can't be easy for you. I want you to know you're welcome to stay in the penthouse as long as you need, Lily. Really." She parted her lips, about to respond, but just then Carl beckoned them over, calling out that he'd found something interesting in the engine block. Lily seized the chance to avoid a decision she wasn't ready to make. She followed Mason across the shop, grappling with a swirl of gratitude and an inexplicable tether to this man who had entered her life in a single storm-blown night. Even amid the mechanical clangs and the brisk efficiency of the auto shop, Lily felt a gentle sense of normalcy creeping into the day. Yes, her car was out of commission, and yes, she was temporarily relying on a man she'd met fewer than 24 hours prior. But the storm was gone, replaced by a brightening sky. Neon signs across the street blinked in the mid-morning light, and the rush of passing vehicles provided a steady backdrop to the swirl of her own thoughts. She watched Mason join Carl under the hood, the two men crouched over the engine. Carl explained a faint clicking sound he'd noticed while preparing the replacement battery. Lily couldn't catch every word, but Mason listened intently, occasionally nodding. It struck her again. He was genuinely invested, not just doing the bare minimum so he could move on. A quiver of emotion flickered in her chest. Surprise, gratitude, maybe a flash of confusion that such kindness existed in a world where she'd grown accustomed to betrayal. Distracting herself, Lily circled to the other side of the car. In the bright daylight, she noticed small scrapes on the paint she hadn't before, plus patches of rust near the wheel wells. Despite all its flaws, the sedan had been a lifeline, her independence. It had carried her away when she moved for the teaching job, determined to start fresh. That independence had always been crucial, especially after her ex left. But now, ironically, she stood in a moment of dependence on someone else's goodwill. "Lily?" Mason's voice pulled her from her thoughts. She found him wiping his hands on a shop towel, that slight smile of his treading the line between friendly and protective. "Carl just finished the check. Battery replacement will solve most of the immediate problem. But there's also a small leak in the radiator. He can patch it temporarily, though a long-term fix might be needed soon." Her heart sank. How soon is soon? "A couple of months, maybe less," Carl chimed in. "I'll do what I can to seal it up, but don't want you driving cross-country on it without a better repair. Otherwise, I'll have you in and out of here in under an hour." He gave her a kind glance. "Just letting you know so you can plan." "Okay," Lily said softly. She felt the baby shift inside her, perhaps reacting to her sudden wave of tension. "Thank you." Carl nodded, then turned back to unscrewing the old battery. Mason gave her a gentle nudge on the shoulder. "We can wait in the front office area if you'd like," he suggested, gesturing toward a makeshift waiting room with chairs and a vending machine. Walking side by side, they entered the small waiting area. It smelled faintly of coffee and engine oil, a clash of aromas that was oddly comforting. A second attendant sat behind a chipped wooden counter sorting through invoices. Lily and Mason took a seat along the wall of plastic chairs. The silence was companionable, each of them aware of how quickly the day's events were unraveling a sense of routine. Lily stole a look at Mason. He seemed lost in thought, eyes distant, perhaps recalculating his schedule or drafting some mental strategy for an upcoming project. Yet he must have felt her gaze because he turned to meet her eyes. "You okay?" he asked in a low voice. She nodded, though a knot of uncertainty twisted in her gut. "It's just a lot," she admitted. "I didn't expect, well, any of this. The storm, my car breaking down, meeting you, staying at your place. And then the reality that I'm so close to my due date. There's so much I still need to figure out. I haven't even settled on a proper plan for maternity leave. My ex left so abruptly that all of my finances, they're all over the place." She trailed off, embarrassed by how much she'd revealed. But Mason, far from recoiling, simply leaned forward, arms resting on his knees. "You mentioned you moved here recently," he said gently. "Why this city, if you don't mind me asking?" A soft sigh escaped her. "The school district offered better pay than my old hometown. And there was an opening that matched my certification. I teach literature, but they needed someone who could handle multiple language arts courses. So I jumped at it." A faint smile touched her lips. "I love reading, especially the classics. Figured I could inspire a few kids along the way." He considered that. "So you took a chance on a new environment?" "Yeah, I did." She folded her hands over her belly. "It was going okay. Then I found out I was expecting. My ex pretended to be supportive, until it wasn't convenient. When he bailed, I told myself I'd manage alone. No matter what." Her gaze dropped to the scuffed tile floor. Mason was silent for a moment, letting her collect herself. "Alone doesn't always have to be the answer," he said at last, voice almost a whisper. In the hush that followed, Lily felt a pulse of raw emotion in her chest. She'd clung to independence so tightly since the abandonment, building walls around her vulnerability. But Mason's words made her wonder if she'd let that wall become a fortress, trapping her fears inside. Before she could speak, the waiting room door creaked open. Carl stood there, a small smudge of grease on his cheek. "All done," he said, waving them over. "I'd let the sealant dry a few minutes, but you can drive it out of here shortly. Battery's new, everything's running smoothly." They rose from their seats. Lily's spirits lifted slightly at how quickly the fix had come. At least she still had a functional car. At the counter, Carl rang up the charges on a battered computer. Mason hung back while Lily approached, rummaging in her purse for a debit card. Thankfully, the total was within range of what she'd feared. No more, no less. She exhaled relief. "Thank you," she told Carl again, offering her card. "And really, thanks for coming out so quickly this morning." He glanced at Mason. "No problem. Mr. Reed's always been good to me, so I try to return the favor when I can." "That's just Mason," the young CEO corrected with a faint grin. "But yes, thanks for hustling." While Lily signed the receipt, she couldn't help feeling a pang. It seemed as if half of her life was a series of near financial crises, while Mason, with all his influence, navigated an entirely different reality. She handed the card back, then smiled politely. "Well," she said, turning to Mason, "my car's ready. Thank you again for everything. I can drop you off wherever you need to go, or if you'd prefer, I can just—" He raised a hand, gently stopping her. "Your place. Is it far? I was thinking maybe I could follow you home. Make sure the car drives okay and you get there without any issues." He shrugged as though it was the most natural offer in the world. "Just in case the sealant or battery acts up again." She blinked. "That's, A mixture of gratitude and caution flared. She didn't want to impose more, but the idea of possibly stalling again, alone and pregnant, was terrifying. "I live on the other side of town. It's an apartment near the school. Really, I don't want to mess up your schedule anymore." He gave a subtle shake of his head. "You're not messing anything up. Please, let me do this." His voice was calm yet insistent. Lily's resistance melted, replaced by a surge of unexpected relief. Maybe it was okay to accept a little help, she reasoned. "All right," she agreed. "Thank you." They parted ways in the parking lot, Lily sliding into her car, Mason returning to his SUV. The moment she turned the key, the engine roared to life with a new, steady rumble. She gave Mason a quick thumbs up through the windshield. He returned it, his SUV's powerful engine humming as he pulled behind her, ready to follow. The drive was not long, though city traffic had begun to thicken with the lunch hour approaching. Rainwater still glistened on the roads, reflecting stoplights in shimmering reds and greens. Every so often Lily glanced in her rearview mirror, spotting Mason's black SUV tailing her at a modest distance. A warmth curled in her chest at the protective gesture. He was a man who had everything, but in this moment, he was simply ensuring her safety, no strings attached. By the time she reached her apartment complex, a modest building with peeling paint, nestled behind a row of slightly nicer condos, the midday sun peeked through thinning clouds. She parked in her usual spot near a faded dumpster enclosure, and Mason pulled in beside her. She stepped out, scanning the worn structure. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. The sight of chipped exterior walls reminded her how precarious her finances had become. Still, she inhaled a small measure of pride for maintaining independence despite the obstacles. Mason got out of his SUV, locking it with a quick beep. His gaze traveled over the building, but he made no comment that might sound patronizing. "Everything felt okay on the drive?" he asked. "Yeah, car ran fine. The new battery's a big improvement." She walked around to the passenger side, popping open the door to grab a folder of teaching materials. His eyes flickered curiously toward the worksheets and lesson plans. She juggled them along with her purse, almost dropping a small binder that housed her bank statements and medical notes. Mason took a step forward, concern in his expression. "You need a hand with that?" Lily shook her head, an embarrassed flush coloring her cheeks. "No, I've got it." But as the binder slipped again, he caught it gently, smoothing the corner that had bent. She gave him a shy, grateful look. "Thanks." He handed it back. "No problem." His gaze drifted to the building's front stoop, where cracked steps led to a battered security door. "Is there a buzzer? Or can I walk you in?" "You can come up," she offered. "The buzzer's broken anyway." That was just another bullet point on the landlord's never-ending list of ignored repairs, but she kept that to herself. They headed inside. The faint odor of mildew hung in the hallway, a poorly lit corridor with flickering overhead lights. She led him up 2 flights of stairs, stepping around a stain on the landing. Inwardly, Lily cringed at the contrast between this place and Mason's penthouse. But she told herself that humility was no sin. She had a roof, and she paid for it on her own. That was something. They reached her door, apartment 3C. The hinges squeaked as she unlocked it and stepped inside. The living room was modest. A second-hand sofa, a small TV perched on a thrifted coffee table, a short hallway leading to a cramped kitchen. The walls were adorned with a few framed prints of beloved literary quotes, and a tall bookshelf stood near the corner, crammed with novels she'd collected since college. "Welcome to my humble abode," she said, setting her folder on the chipped coffee table. Part of her almost wished she could hide the worn couch cushions or the scuffed vinyl floor, but Mason's gaze was thoughtful, not judgmental. "It's cozy," he said sincerely, eyes drifting to the bookshelf. Titles old and new lined the shelves, from Shakespeare and Bronte to modern YA novels. "You really are a teacher at heart." She cracked a faint smile. "Books have always been my escape. Ever since I was a kid, stories were my solace, especially when life got complicated." Mason lingered near the shelf, trailing a finger over the spines. "I get that. I used to code for hours, my own version of escaping, I guess." A hush settled between them. Lily sank onto the sofa, fatigue tugging at her limbs. The emotional toll of the last 24 hours caught up with her. Mason turned, noticing how her posture slumped. "You look tired," he said softly. "Are you feeling all right?" She paused, scanning her body's signals. A mild ache pulsed low in her back, accompanied by that ever-present heaviness in her abdomen. "I'm okay," she answered, pressing a hand to her belly. "Just a bit worn out. I'll probably rest a while." A wave of protectiveness flickered across Mason's face. "Is there anything you need? Groceries? Medication? Anything?" She shook her head. "I think I have enough in the fridge. Thank you, though. You've done more than enough. Really." She met his gaze, sincerity brimming in her eyes. "I owe you so much." He dismissed the notion with a gentle wave of his hand. "Don't worry about that. I'm just glad you're safe." Then he hesitated, glancing at the battered door. "But are you sure you'll be all right here alone? My place is still open to you." Her heart fluttered unexpectedly at the invitation. She turned away, trying to steady her breath. Part of her wanted to accept. Being alone sometimes felt daunting, especially with the baby so close. Yet she also clung to her independence. "I need to manage on my own," she whispered. "I understand," he said, though there was no mistaking the hint of concern in his tone. "Just promise me, if you need anything at all, you'll call me, day or night." She nodded, retrieving her phone to confirm his number was saved. A faint glimmer of relief spread in her chest, knowing she had a lifeline. "I promise," she murmured, touched by his earnestness. A final moment of silence stretched out, layered with emotions they didn't name. Mason cleared his throat. "All right then. I guess I'll head out and let you rest. Just take care, okay?" She walked him to the door, her body feeling heavier with each step. "Thank you," she repeated, her voice thick. "For everything." He offered a lopsided smile. "I'll check in tomorrow just to be sure your car's still running fine." With that, he stepped into the hall. Their eyes met for a brief moment, a silent note of understanding passing between them. Then the door eased shut, the latch clicking with soft finality. Alone now, Lily leaned against the aging wood, an odd mixture of relief and loneliness washing over her. The quiet hum of the apartment seemed louder than usual, the hum of the fridge accentuated by the hush. She pressed a hand over her baby bump, feeling a faint stir in response. "It's okay," she murmured. "We'll be okay." Yet her thoughts drifted back to the man who had stepped into her life so unexpectedly, who had shown compassion without hesitation. Mason Reed. His name lingered in her mind, entwined with a sense of comfort she couldn't dismiss. She willed herself to move forward, to cling to the independence that had kept her afloat, but somewhere deep inside she felt a subtle shift, like the very foundation of her solitary resolve had a tiny crack, letting in the possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, she didn't have to navigate life's storms all on her own. The next day dawned hazy and warm, the aftermath of the storm lingering in the form of humidity that clung to the morning air. By the time Lily arrived at the school parking lot, her freshly repaired car was sputter-free, thanks to Carl's handiwork. Still, she found herself gripping the steering wheel a bit too tightly, flashes of the previous day's chaos playing in her mind like a distant dream. "You're okay," she said under her breath, a subtle pep talk for herself and the baby. Gathering her satchel of lesson plans, she stepped out, feeling the sticky climate wrap around her. The school building, a long, low structure with faded red brick, awaited, and she squared her shoulders, heading toward the double-glass doors. Inside, the hallways buzzed with students' chatter and the echoing sound of lockers slamming. Other teachers rushed by with arms full of papers, offering quick nods of greeting. Lily smiled back, trying to match their energy. She was used to the bustle, the chaotic hum that accompanied any school morning, but today her mind drifted to another presence entirely. Would Mason actually check in like he'd promised? Perhaps. The memory of his genuine, steady gaze flickered through her mind. She reminded herself she wasn't obligated to him. He hadn't asked anything in return. Yet a pang of something, anticipation maybe, twisted in her chest at the thought of hearing from him. She made her way to her classroom, room 214, a modest space with scuffed floors and walls lined by reading posters and student projects. Rows of slightly worn desks faced a whiteboard and shelves at the back brimmed with paperbacks. She flicked on the overhead lights, stifling a yawn. The baby had been more active last night. Every time she shifted in bed, she'd felt little fluttery movements or outright kicks that kept her half awake. Placing her satchel on the desk, she removed the day's lesson materials, Romeo and Juliet quizzes to hand back, an excerpt from To Kill a Mockingbird to discuss with the advanced group, familiar tasks, which was comforting in a world that sometimes felt too unpredictable. "Ms. Dawson," a voice chirped from the doorway. Lily glanced up to see Lexi, one of her juniors, peering around the frame. "Are we doing the quiz corrections today?" Lily smiled, propping her hands on her belly. "Good morning, Lexi. Yes, we'll go over corrections, and we'll talk about the next unit. Class starts in 10 minutes, so grab your seat." Lexi bounced in, promptly chatting about her weekend, her hair flipping in a high ponytail as she went on about the storm. Lily nodded along, her expression friendly. "I'm just glad nobody got hurt in the neighborhood," she said, remembering the terrifying downpour. "All right, give me a moment to set up." Lexi took her seat while Lily hastily organized her stacks of papers. More students trickled in, settling into desks or bantering with friends. Gradually, she found her usual rhythm, greeting the teens, handing out worksheets, answering a few questions about upcoming deadlines. There was comfort in this routine, the purpose she found in guiding her students through literature. As class officially began, Lily delved into a lively discussion about symbolism and character motivation. She felt the baby shift now and then, but her mind mostly stayed focused on the present. The lesson carried on, the students surprisingly engaged. Perhaps the dramatic love story of Romeo and Juliet still had a way of captivating even modern teens. By the time the bell rang at the end of her second period, Lily felt a wave of fatigue creeping in. Teaching multiple classes back-to-back, especially while pregnant, was no small feat. She made a mental note to schedule a quick water break. She had just finished tidying the desks when her phone buzzed in her pocket. Fishing it out, she noticed a message from an unknown number. Her heart gave a tiny jolt, but a second glance confirmed it was simply a school-wide text about a staff meeting on Friday. A flicker of disappointment followed. She realized she'd secretly hoped it might be Mason. "Don't get your hopes up," she murmured, chastising herself. She set the phone aside and prepared to greet the next wave of students shuffling in, textbooks clutched to their chests. By lunchtime, Lily's exhaustion had bloomed. She sank into her chair behind the desk, half-heartedly nibbling on the sandwich she'd packed the night before. The faculty lounge felt too far away, so she opted to remain in her classroom, resting her feet under the desk. The overhead lights buzzed faintly. The hallway sounds of laughter and lockers echoing through the door left ajar. That was when her phone vibrated again. Another message, this time from a number she recognized. Mason. Her pulse did a little flutter as she opened the text. Mason. Hey, just wanted to see how you're doing today. How's the car? And how are you feeling? The corners of her lips curved upward, relief and warmth flooding her. His concern felt as genuine as it had the night before. She typed back a quick reply, trying to keep it casual. Lily. Hi, Mason. Car's good. No issues on the road. I'm at school. So far, so good. Tired but hanging in there. Thanks for asking. She hit send, the phone feeling oddly heavy in her hand. Why did a simple check-in make her feel so lighter? She tucked the device into her purse, telling herself not to obsess about it. Yet a small part of her was undeniably happy he had followed through. Just as she finished her sandwich, she got another text. She glanced at the phone. Mason, glad to hear it. Don't push yourself too hard. Need anything? Lily snorted softly at his understated kindness. She was hardly about to call him for coffee or a snack run. Still, the offer was sweet, unexpected from someone she'd met under such random circumstances. For a moment she pondered whether he was simply polite or if there was a deeper intention behind his messages. Did it matter? Her thumbs hovered over the keyboard before she replied, Lily, all good here. Thanks. Just teaching the bard to a bunch of kids who'd rather be on social media. You know how it is. She set the phone back down, not expecting another immediate reply. Standing, she stretched her arms overhead, grimacing at the mild ache in her lower back. She walked to the whiteboard to reorganize notes for her afternoon classes. But within moments, the phone buzzed again. Mason. I wouldn't mind being in your class, actually. Probably learn a thing or two. Let me know if the kids need a tech CEO career day speaker. A light laugh escaped her, enough that one of her students, who'd come in early for the next period, raised an eyebrow. Lily shook her head, tucking the phone away with a playful grin. The idea of Mason giving a talk to her rowdy teenagers was both hilarious and strangely appealing. Ms. Dawson? The student asked, curiosity plain. Everything's fine, Lily reassured, stepping back into her teacher role. Just a friend checking in? Friend. The word rang in her head as she returned to the front of the classroom, where she'd soon lead yet another discussion on literary devices. She wondered if that was indeed what Mason had become, a friend, or perhaps something more unspoken. The question fueled a tiny thrill within her that she quickly pushed aside. She needed to remain grounded, responsible. She had a baby on the way and bills to pay, after all. Yet all through the afternoon classes, beneath the flow of analyzing passages and addressing students' questions, Lily felt a quiet spark of possibility igniting a corner of her heart. It was fleeting, delicate, and she wasn't about to chase it recklessly. But it was there, a reminder that sometimes life offered gentle surprises that could break through even the toughest walls. When the final bell released its resounding echo, Lily spent another hour grading quizzes and tidying her classroom. By the time she finally left the school building, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. The heat of the day had waned into a tolerable warmth, and she breathed in the lingering scent of grass and asphalt. The drive back to her apartment was mercifully uneventful, her old sedan purring along faithfully. Parking outside her building, she steeled herself for the 2 flights of stairs that always felt steeper after a full day of teaching. Once she unlocked her apartment door and stepped inside, she exhaled relief. Her living room was dim and quiet, the stale air carrying a hint of mustiness after being closed up all day. Kicking off her shoes, Lily made a mental note to pick up some fresh groceries, maybe tomorrow. She dropped her keys on the small side table by the door, intending to rummage for a quick dinner. But something compelled her to check her phone. Maybe Mason had texted again. She opened her messages, only to find it empty of new notifications. A small wave of disappointment rippled through her. She scolded herself for it. He wasn't obligated to text her constantly. He had his own busy life. With a tired sigh, she flipped on the overhead kitchen light. The fridge was sparse, a carton of eggs, half a gallon of milk, some wilted lettuce. She really needed to do better at keeping healthy foods on hand, especially in her condition. A wave of tiredness and mild frustration hit. There was no one else to handle these tasks, no partner to pick up the slack. That was the reality. As she contemplated a simple omelet or a PB&J sandwich, her phone buzzed at last. She practically lunged for it. Mason. Long day? If you're up for it, I'd love to drop by with some groceries. Totally up to you. No pressure. Her mouth parted in surprise. How did he guess? Perhaps it was just sheer intuition. For a moment, she wrestled with pride, remembering how determined she was not to lean on anyone. But another part of her, the exhausted, hungry, pregnant part, found the offer more tempting than she cared to admit. She stared at the text, fingers hovering. Then, heart pounding, she decided to accept this small kindness. Lily, I won't say no to that, but I feel guilty making you come out of your way. My address is 324 Irving, Apt 3C. You already know that. Door might be a little squeaky. Mason responded quickly. Mason, no guilt. I've got some free time tonight. I'll grab a few staples and swing by soon. See you. She placed the phone on the counter, a strange mix of emotions churning within her. Relief, gratitude, a hint of excitement, but also a lingering unease at letting someone, especially a wealthy, successful man like Mason, step into her private life even further. Yet, staring at her nearly empty fridge, she couldn't deny she welcomed the help. Just groceries, she told herself, rubbing her belly softly, and maybe some conversation. Still, her heart pounded at the possibility of letting him see how she lived, of bridging that gap between his world and hers. She busied herself straightening the living room, fluffing couch pillows, discreetly pushing aside clutter. Soon enough, a rap on the door signaled his arrival. Taking a steadying breath, Lily opened it, bracing for the shift that came every time she saw him. Mason stood in the dim hallway, a paper grocery bag in each arm, wearing a casual button-down and jeans. His hair, usually neatly styled, was slightly tousled, like he'd run a hand through it in a hurry. The corners of his lips tilted into a small smile, revealing a touch of shyness that she realized she found endearing. I brought reinforcements, he announced, nodding at the bags. Hope you don't mind that I guessed on a few things. Staples like fruit, veggies, some protein, and maybe a little ice cream. Figured pregnant cravings might enjoy that. A soft laugh escaped her. You guessed right. Come in. She stepped aside, letting him enter her modest apartment. Despite the evening light casting warm shadows across the worn furniture, she suddenly felt hyper-aware of every imperfection. The peeling wallpaper near the kitchenette, the scuffed rug by the sofa. But Mason gave no sign of noticing. He simply placed the bags on her small kitchen counter and began unpacking them, meticulously lining up fresh produce and basic groceries. Lily watched, arms folded loosely over her belly. "This is a lot of food," she remarked softly. He paused to look at her, kindness in his gaze. "It's just a few days' worth," he said, tone light. "I didn't want to go overboard, but you mentioned being tired after school. Figured a stocked fridge might help." She pressed her lips together, emotion rising in her throat. "Thank you, really." Catching her wavering tone, she inhaled quickly, schooling her features. "Let me at least pay you back." Mason shook his head. "No need. Consider it a little gift. For you, and for the baby." Her eyes stung for a moment, touched by his heartfelt generosity. Rubbing the back of her neck, she tried to find a response that struck the right balance between gratitude and independence. "If you keep doing this," she teased gently, "I might start relying on you." To her relief, he chuckled softly. "I can think of worse fates." He slid the last carton of milk into her fridge, then turned around, leaning back against the counter. The open space between them felt charged, quieter than the storm that first brought them together, but no less significant. "Mason," she began, trying to phrase a question that had been prodding her mind. "Why are you really doing this? I don't mean to sound ungrateful, but I'm just curious." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I'm still figuring that out myself," he admitted. "But when I saw you stranded, something told me not to just drive by. And after hearing your story, I guess I just wanted to help in whatever way I could. You've been through enough alone." A wave of raw feeling broke over her. She remembered all the nights she'd spent crying in solitude, the betrayal she'd experienced when her ex vanished, the burden of forging ahead without a safety net. "I've gotten used to doing everything alone," she whispered. His gaze searched hers. "I get that. Independence is important. I'm the same way in my world, rarely leaning on anyone, but sometimes life's too big to handle without a little help." She nodded, touched by how he understood. Warmth pooled in her chest, and she allowed a small smile to emerge. "You might be right," she murmured. Maybe I do need help. Just a little." Mason's expression softened. "Good," he said, and for a moment neither of them spoke, as if recognizing an unspoken bond forming. Then he lightly clapped his hands, the moment easing. "Should I, help you put this stuff away, or would you like to do that on your own?" Lily laughed, the tension dissolving into a lighter note. "I can handle it," she said. "I'm a champion grocery putter-awayer." He grinned. "I'll watch and learn then. There might be an art to it I haven't mastered yet." As she moved about the small kitchen, organizing fruits in the fridge drawer and stacking cans in the cupboard, she sensed him behind her, quietly observant, respectful. This was such a simple, normal task, yet it felt strangely significant. Mason Reed, tech CEO, polished entrepreneur, man of near infinite resources, was leaning against her modest counter, content to be here helping her stock groceries. She set the final box of cereal onto a shelf and turned to face him. "All done," she said, taking a small, satisfied breath. He nodded, then glanced around. "Do you want me to go? I don't want to intrude on your evening." She hesitated, her heart thumping. Part of her wanted to say yes, thank him again, and shut the door, keep him at a safe distance. Another part, the part that ached for connection, whispered that it wouldn't hurt to share a bit more of her world. "You could stay," she found herself offering. "If you're not busy, we could, I don't know, watch a show or just talk?" Her cheeks warmed at the invitation, but she held his gaze. His face brightened, eyes sparking with relief. "That sounds nice," he admitted. I wouldn't mind. Let's do it. She offered him a quiet smile, leading him into her living room. They settled on the worn sofa, an odd hush falling over them as the last light of day painted the windows in orange and pink. Lily felt her pulse in her throat, the sense that an invisible line had been crossed. No longer was she simply someone he'd rescued, and no longer was he just a benevolent stranger. They were forging a connection, tentative and real. In the background, the hum of a city night rose, distant traffic and the occasional siren weaving through the open window. Lily curled her legs onto the couch, pressing a hand over her belly as the baby gave a soft nudge. For the first time in a long while, she felt a semblance of ease in her tired spirit. She stole a glance at Mason, seeing him scan her face like he was equally curious and equally unsure. No, she thought, life doesn't suddenly transform overnight. But in that simple, peaceful moment, on a second-hand couch in a modest apartment with groceries newly stocked, Lily felt the stirring of possibility. She might not have to face the future on her own, not if she was brave enough to let someone else in. And that, she realized, was the gentle promise shining in Mason Reed's eyes. Nightfall wrapped Lily's apartment in a quiet hush, the fluorescent glow from a nearby street lamp illuminating the living room with a soft amber cast. Mason sat at one end of the worn sofa, Lily at the other, a small gap between them punctuated by the occasional flicker of the TV. They'd settled on a streaming service, half watching an old sitcom while mostly talking about their vastly different worlds. It's definitely not the penthouse, Lily said softly, gesturing at her surroundings. She'd made a half-joking remark about her place being too cramped, but now she felt self-conscious. Mason turned his gaze from the television, meeting her eyes. "Your home is warm," he said with a tone of finality. "And I don't just mean the temperature. It feels lived in, welcoming." He paused, glancing at a shelf lined with small photo frames. "Besides, there's more love in a tiny space than in any mansion, if the right person is there." His words made her heart flutter. The sincerity in his voice silenced her self-doubt for a moment. "I appreciate that," she replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Though I guess you've noticed I live pretty simply." "Simple isn't bad," Mason returned, a trace of a smile curving his lips. "Honestly, I grew up very differently than how I live now. My mom was a single parent for years. We had to budget everything. I was on scholarships in college, working side jobs just to keep up. The penthouse came much later, after Reed Innovations really took off." She studied him curiously. "I guess I assumed you came from a wealthy background, considering everything I have now?" He let out a quiet laugh. "No, that was a product of countless sleepless nights, coding marathons, and luck. Believe me, my mother still scolds me for buying unnecessary luxuries." Lily smiled, picturing a younger Mason hunched over a laptop in a modest living room, maybe not so different from hers. "She sounds like a good mom." "She is," he agreed, his expression softening. "I'll always be grateful for how she pushed me to chase my ideas, especially when nobody else believed I could build a company from scratch." Lily nodded, imagining the sheer determination that journey must have taken. Her eyes flickered to a photo on her shelf, a snapshot of her younger self in a graduation gown, parents standing beside her. "I wish my parents were still around," she said in a small voice. "They passed when I was in college. It was just an accident." Her voice caught, but she pushed on. "Sometimes I think about what it'd be like to share all this with them. Tell them about the baby, even though my life hasn't gone as smoothly as I hoped." Mason's gaze was steady, empathetic. "I'm so sorry. Losing them, that must have been indescribably hard." She lifted a shoulder in a half shrug, tears threatening at the edges of her eyes. "I coped by burying myself in school and work. I always thought if I just kept moving forward, I wouldn't break down." Maybe that's why I insisted on being independent no matter what. He was silent for a moment, the TV sitcom's laugh track a faint echo behind their conversation. Then he scooted a bit closer, reducing the gap between them on the couch. "I get it," he said gently. "Being strong all the time can be lonely, though." She swallowed, nodding. "It can. I've had friends over the years, but everyone eventually moves on, you know? Gets married, has their own families. I've just never quite fit into that picture." Mason gave a thoughtful hum, resting his hands loosely on his knees. "Fitting in can be overrated," he offered, a playful glint in his eye. "Anyway, I'd argue you're about to have a family. A baby's on the way." Her lips twitched in a melancholy smile. "Yeah, a family of 2, I guess." She placed a hand on her belly, feeling a soft roll. "I'm excited and terrified. Doing it alone wasn't part of my plan, but I'll do whatever it takes." He hesitated, a flicker of protectiveness crossing his face. "What if you don't have to do it alone, though?" His question was tentative, not forced, yet it thrummed in the air. "I'm not trying to overstep," he continued. "Just, if you ever need someone to drive you to appointments or bring you soup or anything, I'm here." An unexpected lump formed in her throat. The kindness in his voice, the unspoken promise behind it. It chipped away at the walls she'd built around her heart. But she also felt a ripple of apprehension. She'd learned the hard way that promises sometimes faded when things got real. "Thank you," she managed at last, voice unsteady. "But you hardly know me. Everything you've done, feels too good to be true." He tilted his head, contemplating. "Maybe we both just got lucky," he said quietly. "Right place, right time. Or," he trailed off, a half-smile on his lips, "maybe fate likes to show off." She exhaled a short laugh, the tension in her chest loosening. "Fate, huh?" He spread his hands in a resigned shrug. "It's as good an explanation as any. I stopped believing all of life was under my control a long time ago. Too many variables, especially in business." They fell into a thoughtful silence, the sitcom credits rolling on screen, replaced by a menu asking if they wanted to continue. Lily reached for the remote, turning the TV off. The living room dimmed to the mild light from the street lamp outside. The hush between them grew palpable but not uncomfortable. Her heart thudded in her chest. Part of her wanted to edge closer, to let herself be enveloped by the warmth and safety he emanated. Another part, protective of her bruised spirit, reminded her not to get too hopeful. "But maybe," a tiny voice whispered, "you could let hope breathe just a little." "How about some tea?" she asked, rising from the sofa. She needed to break the current of intensity before she said something she wasn't ready to confront. "I have chamomile, or some apple cinnamon blend." "Tea sounds great," he agreed, standing as well. She noticed how tall he was, broad-shouldered but with a gentleness in his posture. "Chamomile, maybe. Nothing too sweet for me." She nodded, flicking on a small kitchen light as she grabbed a pot to boil water. Mason followed her into the compact space, leaning against the counter just as he had earlier. Despite the narrow quarters, his presence didn't feel invasive. Instead, she found herself oddly reassured by him being there. While waiting for the water to heat, she shot him a sidelong look. "So, how was work today? Big meetings? Or did you skip them again to rescue more pregnant strangers?" He chuckled. "No more rescues," he teased. "Had a few video conferences. My CFO insisted I look at some charts. Profit margins, user analytics, all the usual. But the day was fine. It was manageable." "Profit margins, user analytics," she echoed, a smirk tugging at her lips. "You're speaking a different language entirely." "Maybe I can give you a crash course sometime," he offered lightly. "And you can teach me about Shakespeare in return." Her eyebrows lifted. "Deal, but be warned I give pop quizzes." "Fair enough," he said, eyes warm. The kettle hissed, a gentle whine indicating it was near boiling. Lily turned off the burner, poured steaming water into 2 cups, and handed him 1 sachet of chamomile tea. She opted for the same, too tired for anything more stimulating. The scents of herbs drifted up, and they retreated to the living room, each holding a mug. Lily picked a corner of the couch. Mason returned to his spot, facing her at a slight angle. For a few moments, they blew softly on their drinks in silence, an undercurrent of unspoken questions swirling in the quiet space. Sipping the warm tea, Lily felt an ease settling over her. Maybe it was the calming properties of chamomile, or maybe it was simply the presence of another person in this tiny apartment, someone who wasn't just passing through, someone who wasn't going to vanish the way her ex had. Eventually, Mason broke the silence. "I was serious about wanting to help," he said carefully. "I know you're used to handling everything yourself, but if there's anything you need, baby supplies, nursery setup, I'd like to be there if you'll let me." She regarded him, her mind buzzing with hesitation and gratitude in equal measure. "I haven't even started a nursery," she admitted, setting the tea down on the coffee table. "I've got a small corner of my bedroom cleared for a crib and some basics. I was saving up for it." "Let me help," he said softly, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "I'm not trying to buy your gratitude, I just have the means, and I genuinely want to make this easier for you." Her eyes stung with threatening tears. She inhaled, steadying herself. She paused, swallowing a lump in her throat. "It's not that I don't appreciate it. I do, more than you know. But you don't have to feel obligated." His hand reached hers, warm and solid. She caught her breath at the contact, her pulse thumping. Gently, he squeezed her fingers. "It's not an obligation," he reiterated. "You matter, Lily. You and this baby. I just want you to be safe and comfortable." He mattered. The realization coursed through her. Maybe letting him care didn't have to mean losing her independence or risking heartbreak. Maybe it was simply sharing a burden, allowing a new bond to form. She squeezed back, blinking rapidly to quell the moisture in her eyes. "Okay," she whispered, voice wavering. "We can talk about it, maybe figure out some baby things together." A fond smile found its way to his lips. "I'd like that." They lingered in that quiet closeness, the faint hum of the city outside like a low lullaby. Lily's mind raced, imagining him there by her side during doctor's visits or painting a corner of her bedroom for a crib. Was it a fantasy, or was it truly possible? Emotions warred inside her. Fear of being let down again, wonder at the path fate had laid before her, and a gentle warmth that said maybe, just maybe, she could trust him. She inhaled deeply, letting the moment stretch. At length, Mason glanced at the clock on his phone, exhaling regretfully. "It's getting late," he murmured. "I should probably head out. Early meeting tomorrow." She nodded, although a twinge of disappointment crept in. She realized how comfortable she'd become, sharing her space and her evening with him. "Right, of course," she said, rising to walk him to the door. "Thank you for everything." Again. He paused at the threshold, turning back to face her. "Do you have any classes in the afternoon tomorrow?" She shook her head. "I'm free after 2. Let's go look at cribs, strollers, whatever you need," he said, an easy suggestion. "We can hit a baby store near my office, unless you'd rather do it alone." Her heart fluttered again. "No, that sounds nice. I'll meet you. Just text me the address, and I'll come by after work." The agreement felt like a big step, a tangible commitment to building something, though neither of them would dare label exactly what. Mason's lips curved in a gentle smile. "Great. See you tomorrow." Leaning in, he pressed a brief, tentative kiss to her cheek, so light that it might have been her imagination. Her skin warmed at the contact, and he pulled away, eyes earnest. Before she could respond or question it, he offered a small wave and slipped out into the hallway. Lily closed the door, leaning her back against it. The apartment felt different now, charged with the lingering echoes of his presence and the promise of a day to come. She touched her cheek where his lips had brushed. It was a chaste gesture, yet it sent a rush through her weary heart. No matter how cautious she tried to be, some part of her was already unlocking. She only prayed she wouldn't regret it. Gathering a breath, Lily returned to the living room and finished her tea, letting the chamomile calm her nerves. Tomorrow, she'd step into a baby store with Mason, choose items for the life growing inside her. A life that, until now, she'd resigned to shepherd alone. But maybe she wouldn't be alone much longer. Sunlight streamed through the narrow windows of Lily's classroom, its warmth reflecting her uplifted mood. The day's lessons had flown by, a lively discussion of modern poetry in her advanced class culminating in surprisingly enthusiastic essays. Even as she guided her students through figurative language, a quiet thrill thrummed beneath her usual teaching composure. Today, after months of bracing herself to handle everything alone, she'd take a new step with Mason at her side. By 2 p.m., Lily was shuffling out the last group of chatting teens, promising them feedback on their poetry within the week. Once the classroom emptied, she quickly gathered her lesson materials, heart fluttering with anticipation. She'd told Mason she'd meet him near his office, and though a whisper of anxiety lingered, the dominant emotion was a gentle excitement. Could she really let her guard down enough to share this moment, buying items for her baby, forging plans with another person? She locked up her classroom and hurried down the hallway, her modest heels clicking on worn tiles. Several colleagues bid her good afternoon, and she smiled politely, wanting to keep this new dimension of her life private just a bit longer. The school's main doors led onto a breezy courtyard, and Lily squinted against the bright sunshine as she made her way to the parking lot. After easing into the driver's seat of her old sedan, she checked her phone. A notification glowed, a text from Mason. Mason, I'm done with my meetings early. Text me when you're close, and I'll meet you in the lobby of the tower. It's at 1824 Waverly Street. Can't miss it. Logo in front. Lily's lips curved into a small smile. She typed back, Lily, leaving now. Should be there in about 20 mins, traffic permitting. Looking forward to it. With that, she pulled onto the road, carefully navigating the lunchtime bustle around the school. Thoughts swirled. What if he changes his mind? What if I'm overstepping by letting him do all this? Yet each wave of self-doubt was balanced by the memory of his earnest gaze, the softness in his tone when he said he wanted to help. By the time she neared the address Mason had given, Lily found herself in a part of the city known for its modern high-rises and upscale boutiques. It was a stark contrast to the more modest streets near her apartment. Glass towers glinted in the afternoon sun, high-end cafes bustled with professionals in tailored suits. She spotted a sleek sign reading "Read Innovations," towering in front of a reflective building that soared into the skyline. Gently, she turned into a parking garage across the street, grateful there was a visitors section open. Once parked, she quickly checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her hair was neatly pulled back, though a few wisps framed her face and her floral blouse stretched around her round belly. Nervous energy fluttered in her stomach. Stop worrying, she told herself. This is just baby shopping with a friend. Stepping out onto the busy sidewalk, she smoothed her blouse. The tower in front of her had a rotating glass door and a polished silver crest displaying Reed Innovations' minimalist logo. She crossed the street carefully, weaving between pedestrians. The building's sleek design seemed a physical manifestation of the world Mason moved in, cutting-edge, lofty, well-funded. Inside, a towering lobby opened up, marble floors, a high ceiling, tasteful modern art adorning the walls. People bustled about with lanyards and laptops heading to and from bank-like security gates. Lily felt a momentary pang of intimidation, uncertain where to stand. But then, she spotted Mason. He was waiting near a sculptural reception desk, dressed in neatly pressed slacks and a pale blue button-down, phone in hand. The tension in her shoulders eased the instant he saw her. His face brightened, a genuine smile replacing the polite, businesslike expression he'd worn while scanning the lobby. He strode toward her, ignoring the curious glances from passing employees. "Hey," he said warmly, leaning in to press a quick, light touch to her arm. "How was your day?" She felt an almost electric tingle at his nearness. "It was good. Students were rowdy, but that's normal." Her voice lowered. "Your building is beautiful. I didn't realize you ran everything from here." He glanced around with an air of modest pride. "It's the main headquarters. We have satellite offices, but this is home base. I spend too much time in these walls." He tilted his head toward the revolving doors. "Ready to go?" She nodded, tucking a stray hair behind her ear. "Lead the way." They left Reed Innovations' lobby, stepping into the bright afternoon once more. Mason guided her to a sleek sedan parked at the curb where a uniformed driver, older with salt and pepper hair, waited by the rear door. Lily's eyebrows lifted in surprise. "This is Thomas," Mason introduced, a note of apology in his tone. "He usually handles corporate pickups for out-of-town clients, but I asked him to drive us today. Makes running errands easier." "Mr. Reed?" Thomas greeted with a polite dip of his head, then offered Lily a respectful nod. "Pleasure to meet you, ma'am." She mumbled a greeting, still adjusting to the notion of having a driver. She wanted to protest that she could drive her own car or at least take Mason's SUV again, but Mason's gentle nod coaxed her to settle in. The back seat was as plush as any high-end vehicle, the slight new car scent floating in the cooled air. Lily carefully hoisted herself in, conscious of her belly. Mason followed, clicking the door shut behind him. "Let's go to the Baby & Co. store on West Haven," Mason said to Thomas, who acknowledged with a quiet, "Yes, sir," and smoothly pulled away from the curb. A swirl of conflicting feelings churned in Lily's mind: gratitude, self-consciousness, curiosity. She cast a side glance at Mason as the city streets blurred by. "I feel a bit out of place," she admitted under her breath. "I'm used to doing everything the simplest way possible." He half smiled, resting his forearm on the seat back. "I get it, but I promise no extravagance is required. We'll just look around, see what you like, maybe pick up essentials." He angled his head, voice dropping low enough that only she could hear. "And Lily, if at any point you feel uncomfortable, just say the word." She exhaled, relief warming her. "Okay, thank you." Soon they arrived at a large baby store, its windows displaying pastel-colored cribs, plush toys, and tiny onesies. Overhead, a cheerful sign read, "Baby & Co." in bright letters. Thomas parked near the entrance, then stepped out to open the door. Lily emerged, heart pounding lightly. She'd never stepped into a store like this for herself. Only once had she accompanied a friend years ago, but that had been a fleeting trip. Now everything was for her and her soon-to-arrive child. Inside, the air was cooler, scented faintly of talcum powder and new fabric. Rows of neatly arranged strollers and car seats greeted them, with bright banners overhead announcing sale items. A display at the front showcased crocheted blankets and tiny hats, each pastel shade reminding Lily of how real this was. A baby would soon be in her arms. She glanced at Mason, who wore a similarly awed expression. "I've never actually shopped for baby stuff before," he admitted. "My niece was born on the other side of the country, so I just ordered gifts online." "Well, we're both rookies then," Lily said, tension easing. The store felt peaceful despite its endless inventory, and other customers browsed with lists or tested out strollers, some with toddlers in tow. Lily took a breath and moved farther in, letting the cheerful environment calm her nerves. A sales associate approached, a woman with a name tag that read Gloria pinned to her pastel polo. "Hello, can I help you find something specific?" Lily's mind blanked momentarily. She realized she didn't have a clue how to begin. I'm looking for, well, everything," she said, a wry smile crossing her face. A crib, maybe a car seat, some clothes, the basics. Gloria brightened, as though she thrived on guiding new parents. Wonderful. First-time mom? Lily nodded shyly, placing a hand over her belly. Let's start with the cribs. You can see which style suits you. Follow me. Mason shared a reassuring look with Lily. Then they trailed Gloria through aisles of high chairs and diaper bags until they reached an expansive section lined with carefully staged cribs. Each one had plush bedding displays and color-coordinated mobiles like miniature dreamlands. Lily ran a hand along a white wooden rail, feeling the smooth finish. Price tags, however, made her heart skip. She quickly scanned a few price points. Some soared well beyond her comfort zone. She hesitated, turning to Mason. Before she could voice her concern, he spoke quietly. "We don't have to buy anything crazy," he said. "Let's pick something sturdy and reliable, one you like. Don't worry about the cost, okay?" She pressed her lips together. This was the crux. Accepting his financial help felt vulnerable. But his eyes were patient, kind. So she took a slow inhale. "Let's see the mid-range ones, maybe?" she asked Gloria, who nodded enthusiastically and led them to a simpler, well-built model. Gloria explained the crib's safety features, adjustable mattress heights, and convertible design. Lily listened intently, occasionally glancing at Mason to gauge his thoughts. He asked practical questions about assembly and durability, things Lily might have overlooked. She caught herself smiling, touched by how seriously he approached it. When they finished, Lily tested the edges of another display crib. "This one's nice," she murmured, heart thumping at the idea of a baby soon lying in it. Mason brushed his fingers over the rail, then looked at Lily. "If this feels right to you, let's do it." Her throat tightened with emotion. "Okay," she said. "This one." Gloria beamed. "Great choice. I'll write up a ticket. Did you also need a car seat or stroller?" Lily stammered, nerves flaring again. "Yes, I definitely need those. And maybe some clothes, though not too many." She bit her lip. "It's a lot to handle at once." "Take your time," Mason murmured. He gestured for Gloria to lead the way, but carefully placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. "We'll figure it out together." Over the next half hour, they strolled the aisles, sample baby carriers strapped to mannequins, strollers lined up in neat rows like a miniature car dealership. Lily tried not to balk at the price tags. Some strollers cost more than her monthly rent. She found one that folded easily and wasn't obscenely priced, letting out a breath of relief when Mason praised its lightweight design. They repeated the process with car seats, functional, safe, no unnecessary bells and whistles. Meanwhile, Lily's emotions vacillated between excitement, finally preparing tangibly for her baby's arrival, and a nagging worry that she was letting Mason do too much. Yet, as they selected a neutral-toned set of onesies and a soft blanket with tiny stars embroidered on it, she caught glimpses of genuine happiness in his expression. That brightness lent her courage. She realized how seldom she'd allowed herself to feel real joy since the day she'd learned she'd be a single mom. Finally, with arms full of picks and a few items placed on the store's rolling cart, they returned to the front. Gloria began scanning everything at the register, and Lily braced for the total. She reached for her wallet, fully prepared to pay for part of it at least, but Mason gently blocked her hand, stepping forward. "I've got this," he said quietly. Lily's protest died on her lips. He offered her a small shake of his head, as if to say, "Let me." Her chest constricted with gratitude and guilt. She settled for placing a hand on his arm, giving it a light squeeze. "Thank you," she whispered. When the final total popped up, Lily's eyes widened. Even the simplest items had added up. But Mason didn't flinch, tapping his card to the reader with calm composure. The machine beeped, printing a receipt. Gloria handed it over, smiling. "Congratulations on your growing family," she said, beaming at Lily's baby bump. Lily smiled back, feeling a rush of unfamiliar warmth at the word family. Outside, the sky held a brilliant late-afternoon glow. Thomas pulled the car up front, and he and another store employee helped load the boxes and bags. Lily watched, her heart thudding with the realization that she had everything she needed for the baby's basic care now. It felt surreal. Mason turned to her, shading his eyes from the sun. "I know you're worried about me doing too much," he said, intuitive as ever. "But trust me, it makes me happy to help. I hope that's okay." Her eyes glimmered with unshed tears. "It is," she managed. "I just can't believe someone would want to do all this for me." He stepped closer, his voice quiet. "Not just for you," he said, gently placing a hand near her belly, not quite touching but close enough to signify. "It's for you both." She gazed up, reading the earnest concern in his eyes. Slowly, she nodded, letting the significance of that statement settle into her heart. Then, noticing how the store employees had finished loading the trunk, Lily carefully climbed into the back seat once more, Mason following. As the car eased into traffic, Lily let her hand rest on one of the new packages, a small bag containing the star-embroidered blanket. A wave of hope washed over her, the sense that maybe she and her baby truly weren't alone anymore. Mason watched her with a kind, reflective smile, as if understanding exactly how monumental these small purchases felt. The city's streets glided past, golden in the late-day sun, and for once, Lily allowed herself to simply be present, to savor the fledgling possibility of building something real with this man. No matter what tomorrow brought, tonight she could celebrate this gentle, heart-opening step forward. One crib, one car seat, one unbelievably kind gesture at a time. Mason's driver navigated the bustling city streets with a practiced ease, the back seat quiet but filled with unspoken emotions. Bags rustled at Lily's feet, tiny clothes, soft blankets, all new and carefully chosen for the life steadily growing inside her. She found her gaze drifting to Mason, who leaned back against the plush seat, eyes half-lidded as if in thought. She couldn't deny a sense of closeness that had blossomed over the past hour. They'd browsed, laughed over outrageous price tags, and shared opinions on color palettes for the baby's bedding. Each moment had felt strangely intimate, almost domestic. Yet it was all so new and fragile. Her phone buzzed, jolting her from her reverie. She fished it from her purse. The screen flashed a reminder about her OB appointment later that week, an ultrasound checkup she'd nearly forgotten she'd scheduled. Stress rippled through her. She'd have to request an extra hour off from school. "You okay?" Mason's voice was soft, pulling her attention back to the present. Lily's eyes flicked to him, then to her phone. "Just a reminder for my doctor's appointment," she explained. "I need to finalize the time off from work." He nodded. "Everything going well so far with the pregnancy?" Concern laced his tone, a concern that warmed her and made her pulse quicken. "As far as I know, yes," she replied, tucking a stray piece of hair behind her ear. "There's always that underlying worry, but the baby's healthy. I'm just tired and a bit sore at times." The corners of her mouth lifted into a self-conscious smile. "Normal, I guess." Mason considered her for a moment. "Need a ride that day?" he offered. "I mean to the appointment. Might save you the stress of fighting traffic." Lily's initial instinct was to decline automatically. She was used to handling appointments by herself. But the idea of going alone yet again weighed on her unexpectedly. Letting someone else be part of it felt simultaneously vulnerable and comforting. "That might be nice," she admitted quietly, hearing the slight tremor of relief in her own voice. "The appointment's Wednesday afternoon. If you're sure it's not a problem?" "No problem at all," he said. "Just text me the details." She nodded, lips curving into a grateful smile. Then she cast her gaze out the window. The cityscape slipped by in a stream of neon signs and stately old buildings. Sunlight had begun its retreat behind tall structures, leaving streaks of amber across the clouds. Soon, Thomas steered the car into Lily's neighborhood, the familiar run-down facade of her apartment building coming into view. The transition from the upscale shopping district to these worn streets felt jarring, but Lily reminded herself that this was her reality, a reality she was proud to maintain even if it wasn't glamorous. The car coasted to a stop at the curb. Mason gestured to Thomas, who hopped out to help with the packages. Lily unfastened her seatbelt, bracing for a wave of self-consciousness about her living situation. But the thought of the baby items stacked in the trunk rekindled excitement. "This is me," she murmured unnecessarily, a slight laugh escaping. She always said that when she returned, though Mason had already been here. Reaching for the handle, she paused and gave him a thoughtful look. "Would you like to come up? Maybe help me carry these? Unless you need to get back." His eyes softened and he turned to the window, scanning the quiet street. "I'd like that," he said, warm sincerity in his voice. "Let me just thank Thomas and we'll be good." They climbed out onto the sidewalk. The cooling evening air brushed Lily's cheeks, and she exhaled, aware that the day had been long but fulfilling. Thomas pulled open the trunk, and Mason started gathering the bags. Lily cradled a smaller one that contained the baby blanket. Thomas gave a polite bow, looking amused in a kindly way. "Ma'am, Mr. Reed," he said, "I'll park around the corner if that's all right. Just give me a call when you need me." Mason gave him a nod, then turned to Lily. "Lead the way." Lugging the infant car seat box and a couple of smaller bags, they headed inside. The hallway was dim, lit by a single flickering bulb. Lily tried not to cringe at the peeling paint near the staircase or the musty smell that lingered by the mailboxes. Mason's calm composure didn't shift, as if none of it fazed him. They made it up the 2 flights of stairs to 3C, Lily unlocking the door with some awkward jostling of the boxes in her arms. Inside, the place was quiet, the faint hum of the refrigerator greeting them. Lily flicked on the lamp in the living room. The space felt tighter than usual with Mason here, plus the new baby gear. "Just set things wherever," she told him, motioning to a corner near her old bookshelf. "I'll figure out how to organize it all later." Mason deposited the car seat box carefully, then stacked a stroller attachment behind it. "Sure. Want me to open anything up now?" She brushed back her hair, considering. "Maybe the crib box should stay in my bedroom. That's where it'll end up." A wave of realization hit. She'd asked him to carry a crib into her bedroom, the most personal area of her apartment. Heat rose in her cheeks. He either didn't notice or pretended not to. Hefting the flat-packed box, he followed her down the short hallway. Her bedroom door squeaked as she opened it, revealing a small, tidy room dominated by a double bed and a window draped with simple curtains. There was little space for much else aside from her dresser. "In that corner, I guess," she directed, stepping aside. She'd cleared a modest spot for a crib, but seeing the box there made the baby's imminent arrival feel more tangible than ever. Mason set it down gently against the wall, exhaling from the effort. "Ooh," he joked, wiping his brow. "Soon we'll be building it, huh?" She stood by the bed, arms folded. "Yeah," she murmured, fondness coloring her voice. "Thank you for this, for all of it." Her gaze flicked to the window where the last of the daylight caught floating dust motes. She felt his presence behind her, close enough that she sensed his warmth. When she turned, Mason was watching her with an expression that mingled curiosity and tenderness. She swallowed, trying to maintain composure. Here, in the privacy of her bedroom, the day's closeness suddenly loomed larger. "You okay?" he asked, noticing her shift in demeanor. She nodded slowly, though her heart thumped. "It's just hitting me," she admitted. "The crib, the stroller. It's all so real now. I was avoiding doing this for so long because I was scared of facing it alone." His gaze held hers. "You don't have to face it alone," he said gently, echoing his earlier promise. "I'm here." A tremor of emotion rippled through her. She reached out, brushing his forearm lightly, a hesitant gesture of gratitude. He covered her hand with his, eyes never leaving her face. It was a moment of fragile understanding, the air thick with possibilities and unspoken fears. Her eyes fluttered shut for a second, overwhelmed by the closeness. Then she opened them, finding him still there, unwavering. Slowly she withdrew her hand, clearing her throat. "Let's go back to the living room," she managed, her voice soft. "I'll get you some water or something." Mason nodded, following her out. The tension that had built in the bedroom eased in the wider space. She gestured for him to sit on the couch, then ducked into her kitchenette to fetch a glass of water. The light overhead hummed faintly, and she noticed her reflection in a mirrored surface above the sink, wide-eyed, slightly flushed. Arranging herself, she returned to find Mason glancing at her bookshelf. He turned as she approached, accepting the water with a murmured thanks. "How are you feeling?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. "No back pain or anything after carrying those boxes?" She shrugged. "I'm a bit tired, but all right. Nothing a good night's rest can't fix." Taking a seat in the armchair across from him, she fiddled with the hem of her blouse. "So, thank you again. I'm repeating myself, but it matters. You've changed so much for me already." He sipped the water, leaning forward, elbows resting on his knees. "It's not one-sided, you know," he said softly. I feel like meeting you, helping you, has shifted something for me too. I've been so driven by work. I forgot how meaningful it can be to connect with someone on a personal level." Her heart fluttered. "Really? You, the big CEO, forgot about personal connections?" A wry grin crossed his face. "Sometimes it's easy to get lost in the rush of expansion plans, investor deals, and constant deadlines. This feels more real, more important than I expected." He hesitated as though weighing his words. "You matter, Lily. More than just a rescue mission or a charity case. I hope you see that." Tears unexpectedly stung her eyes. She blinked them away, trying to steady her voice. "I'm beginning to," she said. For months, she'd believed she was nothing but a cast-off, abandoned by the one person who should have stood by her during pregnancy. Now, hearing Mason affirm her value sent waves of relief and a fragile sort of hope. She looked up, spotting the gentle compassion etched into his features, and wondered if she dared to trust it. A swirl of emotions pressed at her chest. Gratitude, longing, fear. She forced a small laugh. "Listen to us, getting all deep," she joked, shaking her head. "It's been a long day. Maybe I should feed you as a thank you." Mason lifted an eyebrow. "You cooking? Unless you prefer takeout. I can't promise a gourmet meal, but I can manage something simple." She stood, scanning her cupboards in her mind. There were fresh groceries now, thanks to him. "I've got pasta, maybe some chicken, salad ingredients." He rose too, setting the empty glass on the coffee table. "Only if it's not too much trouble," he said, stepping toward her. "I've gotten used to working late and surviving on microwave dinners, so even simple sounds great." A grin found its way to her lips. "Let's do it then." She guided him into the kitchenette, flipping on a small overhead light. The space was cramped for 2 people, but he didn't seem to mind, positioning himself near the counter to stay out of the way. As she filled a pot with water, Mason rummaged in the fridge, retrieving tomatoes and lettuce for the salad. Between the rustle of ingredients and the clink of pots, Lily felt a comfortable rhythm settle in. Every so often their eyes would meet and they'd share a brief smile. It was surreal, domestic, almost cozy. She stirred pasta, adding a pinch of salt, while he chopped vegetables with careful precision. Time seemed to slow, the stress of the day melting into a sense of communal purpose. Soon, The aroma of sautéed chicken mingled with the steam from boiling pasta. Lily tested a noodle, declaring it done. She drained it over the sink, water gurgling down. Mason tossed the salad, perhaps a bit awkwardly, but it pleased her to see him so willing to help. When they were finished, she set out 2 mismatched plates on her small dining table, a tiny 2-person setup she'd never really used with anyone else. They sank into chairs, plates brimming with simple home-cooked fare, pasta with a light sauce, grilled chicken, and fresh salad. Lily couldn't help the proud glow in her chest. She'd provided a meal, a real meal, not just a quick snack or takeout, and for someone who'd done so much for her. They ate quietly at first, savoring the food. The occasional scrape of forks against plates provided a gentle soundtrack. Eventually, Mason glanced up. "This is really good," he said appreciatively. "Thank you." She smiled, spearing a piece of chicken. "Not bad for a thrown-together dinner, huh?" Their conversation drifted as they ate. He recounted a funny anecdote from work, how a software glitch caused a VIP demo to glitch mid-presentation, prompting frantic improvisation. Lily shared a snippet about her students' reactions to poetry assignments, how some complained but secretly got into it. Simple, everyday things. A comfortable warmth spread in Lily's chest. In that moment, it was easy to forget the gaps between their worlds. The battered walls of her apartment felt friendlier, somehow lit from within by this quiet exchange. When they finished, Mason insisted on washing dishes, rolling up his sleeves to tackle the sink. She laughed, protesting that he was a guest. He shot her a mock stern look, and she relented, handing him a sponge while she dried. At length, the dishes were done, and they meandered back into the living room. Lily caught the clock on the wall, past 8 already, the evening slipping by. The baby kicked, and she reflexively rubbed her belly. "Tired?" Mason asked softly, noting her movement. She exhaled. "A little, but a good tired, if that makes sense." He nodded. "It does." Standing near the couch, he glanced at the stroller boxes stacked by the wall. "I'm glad we got some of these basics sorted out. You shouldn't have to wait till the last minute." "Agreed," she said, sinking onto the couch with a grateful sigh. "I feel more prepared already." He remained standing for a beat, as if weighing whether to stay or go. "Should I leave you to rest?" he asked gently. "I don't want to overstay." A note of reluctance tugged in her chest, yet she recognized her fatigue. "I don't want to kick you out," she admitted, "but I could use some sleep." She smiled lightly. "You've done more than enough for one day." Mason looked relieved, yet a hint of wistfulness flickered in his eyes. "I'll head out then," he said. He checked his phone briefly, then set it aside. "But let me call Thomas to pick me up since I had him park somewhere nearby." She nodded, feeling a stir of gratitude that he didn't just vanish the way some people did. "Sure, you can wait here until he arrives." He tapped a message on his phone, then leaned down, taking her hand in a surprisingly gentle gesture. "I'll check in tomorrow, all right? Let me know how you're feeling." Her throat constricted, affection brimming. "I will," she said. "Thank you for today, for everything." They stood there, hands briefly clasped, an echo of the tenderness they'd shared earlier. She felt the warmth of his palm against hers, the steady pulse that seemed to answer the fluttering of her own heart. Then, gradually, she withdrew her hand, her cheeks warm. She walked him to the door, her heart fluttering again as he paused under the dim hallway light. His voice dropped to a gentle hush. "Good night, Lily." Her response was almost a whisper. "Good night, Mason." He left with a small smile, the hallway swallowing him in quiet. Lily closed the door, leaning her forehead against the wood for a moment, breath catching in her throat. It was impossible not to sense a change in her life's current, like fate had nudged her onto a new path, full of hope and potential risk. She pressed a hand to her belly, feeling the baby move as if in agreement. "We'll be okay," she whispered, echoing the mantra she'd repeated so often, only now it resonated with renewed faith. Because for once, she didn't feel so alone, and maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to be anymore. Wednesday arrived with a crisp blue sky, the kind of morning that teased spring was around the corner. Lily finished teaching her last morning class by noon, then spent the next hour preparing a sub-plan for the single period she'd missed that afternoon. It felt odd to relinquish her classroom to someone else, even for a day, but her thoughts kept drifting to her upcoming OB/GYN appointment and the possibility of Mason being there. She'd never brought anyone along before. Every ultrasound, every checkup had been a solo mission. The first time her ex had bothered to join her, he'd spent the waiting room scrolling on his phone, grumbling about wasted time. And after he left, she'd quietly resigned herself to facing her pregnancy alone. Now, she was trying not to overthink what it would mean to share this milestone with Mason. Lily gathered her things and locked the classroom door. The early afternoon sun poured through the tall windows in the hallway, lighting her path to the staff lot. She carefully drove home to drop off her satchel and change into something more comfortable, a loose dress that accommodated her belly easily. Checking the clock, she realized she still had time before the appointment. Her fingers hovered over her phone, the internal debate flaring. Should she text him now or just go straight to the doctor's office? But as if reading her mind, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. Mason, ready whenever you are. I can pick you up at your place or meet you at the clinic. Your call. A small wave of relief washed over her. His steady support felt like an anchor she hadn't known she needed. She typed back, Lily, thank you. I'll be at my apartment in 15 minutes. If that's okay, maybe you can pick me up? The clinic isn't far, but parking can be a pain. Seconds later, Mason. Perfect. See you soon. She set her phone aside and brushed a few imaginary creases from her dress. Anxiety and anticipation tangled in her chest. This wasn't just a quick favor, this was stepping into a deeply personal part of her life. The 15-minute ride passed quickly, and soon she stood at her window, watching for Mason's SUV. Her pulse kicked up when it rolled into view, that familiar black vehicle shining in the midday light. She headed downstairs, careful not to rush on the worn steps. He met her at the curb, leaning against the passenger door. Dressed more casually than usual, dark jeans, a light button-down, he still carried the quiet confidence that marked his presence. Something in his eyes shifted when he saw her, reflecting relief and subtle warmth. Hey, he greeted softly, opening the door for her. How was your morning? She exhaled, shrugging. Mostly normal, just busy with lesson plans. Thank you for coming, really. His expression told her that no thanks were necessary. Once she settled in, he circled the front of the SUV and slid behind the wheel, adjusting the mirrors out of habit. Let's head out, he said, a calm resolve in his voice. The drive was short, only a few blocks over to a medical building near the city's main hospital. Lily pointed out the turn into a parking structure, and Mason found a spot on the second level. They walked side by side toward the elevators, Lily wrapping a protective arm around her belly as they passed through the automatic doors. A sense of unease knotted her stomach as they approached the reception desk. She registered, getting a clipboard of forms to update. Mason waited quietly, hands in his pockets, observing the pastel-colored waiting room with its baby-themed posters and pamphlets on prenatal classes. Several other pregnant women and their partners occupied the chairs, flipping through magazines or tapping on phones. Lily found an empty seat, Mason settling in next to her. The room's hush, broken occasionally by muffled chatter, seemed to amplify every doubt in her mind. Was she jumping too fast, letting him be part of something so intimate? But then she felt his discreet glance, a gentle reassurance in his eyes, and she inhaled slowly, finding comfort in his presence. At last, a nurse called her name. Lily stood, feeling a fresh wave of nerves. She looked at Mason, about to tell him he could wait in the lobby if he wanted, but his gaze held a quiet question. Should I come? she answered with a nod, heart thumping. They followed the nurse into a small exam room, pale green walls lined with posters about fetal development. After confirming her weight and blood pressure, which Lily noted were stable, the nurse gestured for her to lie down on the exam table. A sonogram machine stood nearby, and Lily's chest tightened. This moment always felt monumental, the rush of seeing her child's heartbeat flicker on the screen. Mason stood back initially, near the corner, but the nurse waved him closer. "Father can come right over here if he likes," she said, her voice friendly. Lily opened her mouth to correct the assumption. He wasn't the father, but decided against it. Explaining would be too complicated, and a faint blush tinged her cheeks. Glancing at him, she saw a flicker of something in his expression, maybe a slight amazement. He approached the bedside, folding his arms. When the nurse squirted cool gel onto Lily's abdomen, she tensed reflexively. Then the ultrasound wand pressed lightly into place, and the machine let out a soft hum. An image flickered on the monitor, a grainy black-and-white glimpse of the baby. Lily's heart always clenched at this moment, a deep, protective love flooding her. She watched as the nurse shifted the wand, finding the right angle. The baby's outline appeared in more detail, a tiny head, curled limbs. Then came the steady flutter of the heartbeat, pulsing in rhythmic bursts. Tears pricked her eyes. For a second, she forgot Mason was even there. But his quiet inhale drew her attention. She turned to see him staring at the screen, awe overtaking his usually composed features. His mouth opened slightly, as if words escaped him. The nurse rattled off measurements, content that everything looked good. The baby's heartbeat filled the air, amplified by the machine's speakers. A whoosh, whoosh, whoosh that reminded Lily of waves against a shore. She felt her own breath catch, shoulders trembling with relief. Everything was fine. Her baby was healthy. Behind her, Mason whispered, "That's incredible." He leaned closer, eyes fixed on the monitor. His gaze held a mixture of wonder and something else, emotion she hadn't expected. In that moment, Lily sensed that he was not just supporting her. He was sharing in the miracle of this new life unconditionally. When the nurse finished, she printed a few ultrasound pictures, handing them to Lily with a bright smile. "You're measuring right on track," she said, nodding at the screen. "Everything looks great." Lily thanked her, wiping the gel from her belly. She carefully sat up, accepting the pictures with shaking hands. Mason hovered, as if unsure whether to help. She flashed him a small smile, indicating she was okay. Once the nurse left, Lily stood, pulling her dress down over her bump. She handed Mason one of the prints, heart pounding. "Here," she murmured. "Keep it if you want." He took it gingerly, as though holding something precious. His mouth curved into a tender smile. "Thank you," he breathed, words barely audible. He studied the tiny outline, eyes scanning the blurred shape of a baby who'd soon be part of Lily's world. "Ready?" she asked, voice trembling from a surge of emotion. The swirling mix of gratitude, astonishment, and a faint edge of fear that this might all be too good to be true. He nodded, stepping aside so she could exit first. The hallway beckoned, bright and clinical. Lily felt his hand rest lightly on her back, guiding her gently. Warmth spread through her limbs at the contact, and she let herself lean into it, just for a second. They scheduled her next appointment at the front desk, then made their way back to the elevator. Neither spoke until they were alone in the hushed confines of the descending car. Lily held the ultrasound pictures to her chest, pulse unsteady. "That was..." Mason began softly, meeting her eyes. "I don't even have words." "Right?" she whispered, tears threatening again. "It feels real every time, but seeing the heartbeat..." He swallowed, stepping closer until the distance between them was only a breath. "I'm so glad I could be there," he said, his voice raw. His hand found hers, fingers gently interlacing. She let him hold it, closing her eyes briefly against the swell of emotion. The elevator pinged, doors gliding open. They stepped out, releasing each other's hands, conscious of people bustling around the lobby. Outside, the late afternoon sunlight felt gentler, the breeze cooler. Lily sighed, hugging the ultrasound prints. Her baby. Healthy and growing, with a heartbeat strong enough to echo in her mind for hours to come. "How about some dinner?" Mason asked once they reached his SUV. He opened the passenger door with a small flourish. "Unless you need to rest." She considered. Part of her wanted to curl up at home, reliving the ultrasound moment in private. Another part longed to share the lingering glow with someone who understood. "Dinner sounds nice," she said quietly. "I'd like that." He returned her smile, helping her in before circling to the driver's side. As they pulled away from the clinic, Lily gazed at the photo in her lap, heart swirling with cautious hope. She'd shared a significant piece of her life with Mason today, letting him glimpse the baby's fragile world. And he hadn't looked away. He'd embraced it, wholeheartedly. Cars streamed by and neon signs lit as twilight crept over the skyline. Lily closed her eyes for a moment, letting the hum of the engine soothe her. Despite the challenges that lay ahead, co-parenting or not, dealing with her ex's betrayal, her precarious finances, this moment felt like a gift. The small ultrasound picture in her grasp was proof of life continuing forward. And maybe, with Mason's presence, hers might continue in a warmer, more hopeful way than she ever dared believe. The next few weeks flew by like scenes from a montage, quiet, meaningful moments woven among bursts of daily routine. Lily and Mason continued to share small milestones, from testing the newly assembled crib in her bedroom to quietly discussing future hopes over evening dinners. Their relationship remained unspoken in many ways, propelled more by gentle care and mutual understanding than by formal declarations. But as Lily's due date approached, an undercurrent of tension seeped into her life. An unexpected complication arose at work. Her substitute for maternity leave backed out last minute, forcing her to scramble for a replacement. Financial worries still lingered, and although Mason's presence provided new emotional support, old fears occasionally surfaced. Would he truly stay? Would he still care when the reality of a newborn's demands set in? At the same time, Mason faced pressures in his company. Reed Innovations was on the cusp of a major product launch, with investor scrutiny at an all-time high. Late nights found him hunched over glowing screens, finalizing code, reviewing marketing campaigns, and smoothing out last-minute glitches. Yet, no matter how chaotic his schedule became, he never failed to text or call Lily, ensuring she felt both seen and safe. On a humid afternoon, about 4 weeks before her official due date, Lily found herself trudging home from school, weighed down by an armful of graded papers and a fatigue that seemed deeper than usual. Her lower back throbbed with a nagging ache. She'd had Braxton Hicks contractions for a week or two, those false alarms that signaled her body's practice for labor. But something about the twinges in her abdomen felt different today, sharper, more insistent. She tried to ignore it. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, sweat clung to her brow. At her door, a wave of pain rolled through her, prompting a soft cry. She dropped the folder of papers, pages scattering across the hallway's scuffed linoleum. For a moment, her vision blurred, and she gasped, pressing a hand to her belly. "No," she told herself, "not yet. It's too early. The baby wasn't due for another month." With shaking fingers, she managed to open the door, stepping into her apartment. The living room swam in the dim afternoon light, dust motes drifting in slow motion. She braced herself against the couch, letting out a ragged breath. Another contraction pulsed, this time strong enough that she cried out involuntarily. A flash of panic cut through her. She tried to call her doctor, but her phone slipped from her clammy hand onto the sofa. Fumbling, she retrieved it, tapping the contact. A ring, then a recorded message. The office was on lunch break. instructing her to dial the hospital's main line in case of emergency. Her heart hammered as the next contraction seized her, even stronger than before. Her trembling hand found the next number on speed dial. Mason. He answered almost instantly, voice slightly breathless. "Lily, everything okay?" She panted, one arm clutching her abdomen. "Mason, something's happening. I'm not sure if it's labor or not. It hurts, and my doctor's not picking up. Where are you?" He cut in, his voice urgent yet controlled. "At home," she managed, tears stinging her eyes. I can't drive. It's too painful." "Stay put," he ordered gently. "I'm on my way. Call an ambulance if it worsens, okay? I'll be there soon." He hung up before she could protest. Lily eased herself onto the couch, breathing as best she could through each wave of pain. Minutes felt like hours, a sweaty haze of discomfort and fear. The contractions seemed to come faster than she'd expected for a first labor. Or maybe her panic magnified everything. In what couldn't have been more than 15 minutes, though it felt eternal, Mason burst through the door, hair disheveled, eyes wide with concern. He must have left his office mid-meeting, ignoring everything to sprint to her. Behind him, she glimpsed the worried figure of Thomas in the hallway, phone in hand, likely coordinating the next steps. Mason rushed to her side, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "Hey, I've got you," he murmured. "Let's get you to the hospital." She groaned through another contraction, nodding weakly. Mason motioned for Thomas to help, and together they supported her out the door. Each step felt like climbing a mountain, and Lily bit back tears as the intense pressure built in her lower body. She sensed the fear etched into Mason's features, though he spoke in calming tones. "Easy, easy," he said, guiding her carefully down the stairs. "We'll be there soon." Thomas had pulled the SUV close, hazards flashing. They helped Lily into the back seat, Mason sliding in beside her. She clutched his hand with a desperate strength she didn't know she possessed, knuckles white. The vehicle lurched into motion, heading toward the nearest hospital. Sirens and horns blurred outside the tinted windows. Mason kept whispering reassurances, pressing cool cloths to her forehead with tissues he'd found. Lily alternated between focusing on his voice and succumbing to the rolling, powerful contractions that hijacked her body. Time lost meaning in a swirl of panic and pain. At the hospital entrance, a nurse hurried out with a wheelchair as soon as Thomas alerted staff that Lily was possibly in labor. Mason cradled Lily under her arms, helping her settle into the chair. Her breath came in ragged gasps. "Too soon," she whimpered, feeling tears wet her cheeks. "It's too soon." The nurse's firm but kind tone broke through. "We'll take good care of you," she promised, wheeling Lily down a corridor to labor and delivery. Mason stayed right at Lily's side, clasping her hand, while a flurry of staff prepared an exam room. Monitor wires, IV lines, swirling lights overhead. Lily felt the bed's crisp sheets beneath her, the pinch of a blood pressure cuff around her arm. She vaguely heard the words premature labor and 36 weeks, and panic seized her anew. Her baby needed more time. But the nurse calmly explained that while it was slightly early, many babies arrived healthy at this stage. The doctor on call examined Lily, declared that her contractions were real and strong and that she was already several centimeters dilated. There was no stopping this now. The baby was coming. "Breathe, Lily," Mason coaxed, leaning in. She gripped his hand like a lifeline. "I'm here." Between contractions, Lily's tears leaked onto the pillow. She'd never imagined giving birth without her carefully planned bag and her usual OB, who was apparently stuck in traffic. But Mason's unwavering presence soothed her raw nerves. Nurses bustled about, hooking up fetal monitors. The baby's heartbeat filled the room in a rapid whoosh-whoosh, reminding Lily to keep faith. Hours blurred into an intense struggle. Pain spiked and she panted through each wave. Mason braced her, supporting her back when she sat up to push. Even behind his encouraging smile, she saw fear. He was witnessing the rawness of birth for the first time, no sophisticated plan or calm discussion. But he never let go of her hand. Lily felt her world narrow to a single focus, bringing her child safely into the air. The nurse coached her to push, counting to 10, praising her progress. Mason wiped sweat from Lily's brow, whispering, "You're incredible, you can do this." Each surge of pain tore an involuntary cry from her throat, but she also felt an inexplicable power rising within. At last, a collective tension filled the room. The doctor who had arrived to replace the on-call staff gave a firm instruction. "One more big push, Lily." She mustered every shred of energy, ignoring the tears, ignoring the burn in her muscles. She pushed with all she had, and suddenly a shrill, miraculous cry pierced the air. A rush of relief, a wave of overwhelming emotion. Lily slumped back, breathless, tears streaming as she heard the baby's cries. Nurses cheered softly, bustling to wrap the infant in a warm blanket. Mason's face, pale and tear-streaked, shone with awe. "You did it," he whispered, leaning down to press a gentle kiss to Lily's forehead. She let out a shaky laugh, sobbing with a strange mix of exhaustion and joy. The nurse approached with a tiny bundle, slightly smaller than full term, but pink and squirming with life. Lily reached out, arms trembling. The baby's cry calmed the instant she nestled against Lily's chest, skin to skin. A hush fell over the room as Lily gazed at her daughter. The baby, her baby, mewled softly, eyes squeezed shut, a tuft of downy hair at the crown of her head. Mason stood beside them, a hand over his mouth as though struggling to contain the magnitude of the moment. Tentatively, Lily lifted her gaze, offering him a look that said everything. "We have a daughter." He sank onto the edge of the bed, gently placing a trembling hand on the baby's back. "She's perfect," he breathed, voice choked with emotion. The small newborn flailed a tiny hand as if grasping for something. Mason slipped a finger beneath her palm, and she curled her miniature fingers around his. Lily heard him let out a hitched sob, tears brimming anew. "She is," Lily whispered, marveling at the warmth and delicate weight of her daughter. Despite the suddenness, the fear, the pain, this perfect little person was here, breathing softly against Lily's chest. In that quiet space, hospital lights humming overhead, nurses stepping back to allow them these precious first moments, Mason met Lily's eyes. His expression carried a depth she'd never seen before, raw and unguarded. No words were necessary. She saw in him the acceptance of a new reality. They were no longer just two people with separate lives. They were tied together in an indescribably beautiful way. He leaned in, pressing his forehead to Lily's, careful not to disturb the baby. Their tears mingled in a soft exhalation of relief. In that instant, the tension of the last month, the uncertainties and fears, all receded, replaced by the knowledge that they had found a love stronger than either had anticipated, forged in stormy nights, hushed hospital rooms, and the unstoppable force of life itself. "I love you," Mason whispered, voice barely audible. Lily let out a quiet sob, cradling the baby in one arm and Mason's hand in the other. She felt her heart swell to hold them both, to embrace this sense of belonging that had once seemed unimaginable. She kissed him, gently, but with an intimacy that promised tomorrow wasn't just an empty wish. Under the fluorescent glow of the hospital room, the newborn baby letting out soft cries, Lily and Mason shared a tender moment of pure unity. They had braved storms and faced lonely nights, but now, in the form of a tiny beating heart and a pair of bright newborn eyes, they discovered a family that neither had expected yet both had desperately needed. A nurse quietly stepped forward to check the baby's vitals, murmuring congratulations. Mason and Lily barely noticed, their gazes locked on each other, tears of relief and joy mingling freely. In that serene, life-affirming bubble, they understood something profound. Love was there in every supportive touch, in every whispered vow to protect and stand by one another, and especially in the gentle, miraculous presence of this new little soul who would forever bind them as one. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen